Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 667 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And the Russian Air Force is getting shot down. What the Air Force doing, though?
Man, what the air defense be doing, though? For real. But beyond that, we are going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine and the deadliest day for the Russian Air Force ever since the first month of the war. This has been a day to remember, certainly for what the Russians did in response to a Ukrainian attack, and also the end result of what happened, which is the 3 bombers being shot down. Before we get into that, though, I have to give y'all a big announcement about this channel and what is going to be happening tomorrow, because we have been able to iron it out, and it is a definite certainty now that on 4 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow, we are going to be putting out the first gun review ever on this channel. We had a community post put out about this not too long ago, but I want to make sure to remind all of y'all to be here at 4 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow, because we are going to be premiering our first ever gun review on this channel. We're going to be using this AK-74 right there. This is a Bulgarian AK-74. The lower is, I believe, a import, or it was cut up into pieces and then re-welded once it made it into the United States. But this is about as real of a Soviet AK-74 that we were able to get our hands on. And we have made about a 10-minute long review of the gun, including firing it and talking about a little bit of its history and interesting quirks and features about the AK-74. We are so excited to finally be able to show y'all something that we've had in the works for a while, and hopefully y'all will all enjoy it greatly. We're planning on trying...
And also, I don't like to toot my own horn very often, but I think everyone's going to be very impressed and happy with the editing on it as well. Everything came together. The presentation the Enforcer did came together perfectly. The editing came together perfectly. We had no glitches, nothing messed up with the cameras. It couldn't have gone smoother. So this is going to be a
Oh, you cut out there.
spectacular video. I think you're going to really like it.
Damn! And hopefully all of y'all will love it, because it is going to be a really cool video. And not only that, we have put a lot of effort into this. I see some people asking, is it recorded or is it live? It's recorded, because we had to go through a lot of effort to film this thing, and funnily enough, the entire thing was done in 2 takes. One take on the set where we actually review the gun, which is where the thumbnail was made, and the other one was made in a completely, well, just a one straight take at the range. So going off of all that, hope that does address that fairly well, because it's going to be quite interesting for sure, no doubt about it, and hopefully y'all will all enjoy this greatly. But moving on out of that quick plug, because we have to plug that thing tomorrow because it is hype as hell. The intro is amazing, and we're also going to be putting out a YouTube short that is going to be around 40 seconds long that will promote the video as well, just in case you want to see like even a smaller snippet about the AK-74. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news and down into the Southern Front over the past 24 hours. The past 24 hours in the Southern Front has been absolutely unbelievable. From what we can tell, the deep state map is inaccurate because, according to our information in geolocated clips, the Ukrainians do control the entirety of Krenki, and this is no longer a Russian-controlled zone. We have also seen in prior clips, like this one from yesterday, that it obviously cannot be Russian-controlled because the Russians are dropping Fab 500s into the middle of Krenki, meaning that if Russian forces were still there, the Russians are bombing their own forces. Which, they're incompetent, but they're not that incompetent. Moving on from that clip, which we had yesterday, after that clip was made, we have heard that there was a general push by the Ukrainian forces southwards from Krenki and on into the Krenki forest itself, or more so, the forest in between Krenki and the Aleski Sands. And I want to get y'all down here real quick so I can show y'all this forest. This forest is going to be the one where we see any major actions being made by the Ukrainians over the next few weeks and months. This forest holds a lot of potential for the Ukrainians to be able to advance onto the main highway in the area, the E97, and continue pushing even further towards the main garrison of Russians at Aleski, or maybe even towards Novikhovka as well. Either one will be detrimental to the Russian defense in this area and mean that the Ukrainians will be able to create a river crossing, a permanent or semi-permanent river crossing, where they can bring over heavier equipment and vehicles, where they can continue to support infantry pushes, or more so combined arms pushes, towards the area of the Armyansk Gap at the north of Crimea, although that's probably way well in the future. Beyond that, however, From what we're hearing, we didn't get a lot of video clips about this today. The Ukrainians were starting to actually make some well-concerted pushes. We do not know how far they were able to make it into the Krynki forest, but it was so severe that the Russians pulled out the fine china, the best way to explain it. They started to bring out the tactical bombers, the Su-34s, in incredibly large numbers, which is something we have very rarely seen in the war so far, and is usually something that is only seen, for example, at Terebrino in the Belgrade Oblast, like when the Russian, the Freedom of Russia Legion was making a breakthrough across the border and was rapidly advancing towards the city of Belgrade itself. We saw that the Russians pulled out Su-34s then. We've also seen the Russians pull out Su-34s during the Balaklia counteroffensive of late 2022, and also in other rare instances, but once again, incredibly rare. We saw that they pulled out as many as they could. We heard that there was nearly 5 or 6 Su-34s that were airborne in the area of the southern Kherson Oblast, and particularly near Krynki. It became a turkey shoot. Out of the 5 or 6 Su-34s that we heard were airborne in the area today, 3 Su-34s ended up being shot down according to the Ukrainian air defense, and not only that, the Russian Telegram, actually operated by the Russians, called Fighter Bomber, has confirmed that there were combat losses over the area of southern Kherson Oblast, but they did not get into exact details about the loss figures. The Ukrainians claim that there were 3. The Russians claim that there were losses, but they have not gotten definite on how many losses there really were. Regardless, we do know that these were the aircraft shot down. They were exclusively Su-34s. It appears that the Su-34s were operating in the area with no kind of air cover or any kind of a Russian attempt at a seed operation. They did not have any Su-35 escort or a MiG-29 or a MiG-35. There was none of that. It was just the Su-34s alone trying to conduct pretty much frontline bombing operations on the advancing Ukrainians inside of the Dealiest forest. 3 of them were shot down. We also have the official Ukrainian infographic here, and we have one video proving that one of the aircraft did crash. And we saw some of the remains, and we'll be showing you all that in a minute. But nevertheless, we can see the infographic put out by the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine claiming the 3 Su-34s to be shot down. And moving on into our hardcore proof, which is on the northern side of the Dnipro River, so it was in Ukrainian hands when these pictures were made, but we got to see some of the remnants of what appears to be the pilot's gear. We can also see the bottom pad of the seat showing that he was able to stamp out whoever this was. But oddly enough, with 3 Su-34s being shot down today, that means that there are 6 Russian pilots that had to eject out of their aircraft or may have possibly died with them. We can see the gear of one pilot right here. We can also see that maybe he didn't get out completely unscathed. We can also see the parachutes. At least one set of 2 parachutes for one of the pilots, and cords that may have gone to a second pilot or maybe a part of the same ejection seat, although we can't really tell too well in this picture. Finally, we
that
can
would
see
be something else. That would be something else if Ukraine could capture those pilots and actually like interrogate them to get information. Do we know if they found them yet?
We know that they're very close to finding them. They did eject over Ukrainian airspace and onto Ukrainian soil on the air side of the river, so the chances of them being able to evade long enough to find some way to escape across the river are going to be slim to none, so they're practically going to be captured probably within the next week or 2.
Well, that'd be good, because if they can capture them and interrogate them and get information out of them, that could be one of the biggest like breakthroughs they've had for intelligence to figure out the front line information, because the pilots probably have a ton of information.
The pilots probably had, maybe in their bombers, inside of the bombers, it probably wasn't ejected with them, laminated maps possibly showing the position of Russian forces in the area, at least near their zone of operation. That may have been inside the aircraft. So if they can locate the wreckage and it didn't get burned up from the resulting inferno of the plane burning on the ground, they may be able to get some information out of that. They may also be able to try and get some information out of the pilots. The information they're probably going to get out of the pilots once they capture them will be information about where are the tactical aircraft regiments of the Russian Federation operating from, where did these aircraft come from, what are the logistical situation like at that airfield, what were the plans for that aviation regiment going on into the future, what kind of operations did they have, how much did they understand about Ukrainian forces and what they were doing in the area, and also what unit they were from. That's some of the information that they may possibly be able to get, and I'm assuming that the Ukrainians are going to be putting a decent amount of resources and effort into trying to find out where these Russian pilots are. We can see in this picture, it appears that they had brought out an Mi-17 to transport the photographer and the rest of this investigative crew to the crash site of this Su-34, or at least to where this Russian pilot ejected. Nevertheless, I'm assuming that they'll probably be using helicopters as well, or even drones with thermal imaging to try and find any people who look like they're a Russian pilot and possibly try and get them and interrogate them as much as they possibly can. The information
and also, I saw someone in the live chat say, by the way, they think that maybe the Russians will try to mount some type of rescue operation to go get these pilots. I really doubt that. That would be really risky on their part to go find them. They don't even know where they are either. And now they're behind enemy lines, so it's even worse. I mean, it's possible, but, I don't think the Russians are going to go hunting for them.
I don't think the Russians are going to be able to go hunting for them, even if they wanted to, because considering that the Su-34, which is purpose-built, really, to fly at lower altitudes and conduct pretty much parachute bombing operations, among some other things, the fact that it was shot down is indicating to me they probably wouldn't be able to get really anyone in there to conduct a rescue operation. They can't float across the river on a boat because the Ukrainians control pretty much all of the marshes along the Dnipro River, so there's no way for them to get to the river to cross it, and to fly a helicopter across that area would most likely be suicidal with the amount of manpads that the Ukrainians have deployed into that area. Certainly around the actual city of Kherson down here, there's a huge air defense perimeter that's been made here, and it would probably be very difficult for the Russians to try and bring over helicopters to evacuate these pilots, or even get an idea of where they are at the moment. But what's very interesting about the Su-34 is that it is made, and this is something we have to mention a great deal, this thing is made largely for low-altitude air support missions. It's not made to be your kind of a bomber like you would imagine, where it's like a B-52, 30,000 feet in the air, carpet bombing a place. This thing is made for semi-precise strikes at lower altitudes. And the fact that these were shot down are showing that whatever air defense system the Ukrainians were using was able to practically look almost at tree line level with its radar and find these aircraft to be able to shoot them down. On top of that, not only is the aircraft designed for lower altitude air support missions, the air war in Ukraine largely requires that aircraft of any variant, whether it be a high altitude fighter, low altitude bomber, whatever it may be, they all have to operate practically at tree level because air defense will pick them up and shoot them down if they fly any higher than that. So the fact that these were lost today is showing that there has been some drastic change in Ukraine's air defenses in the area, and that's why they were able to inflict such a high number of losses onto the Russian Air Force. Regardless, today was the deadliest day of the war for the Russian Air Force over this past year, and we have not seen losses like these, losses this high, even during the airfield attacks that the Ukrainians conducted all the way up on the Pskov airfield, which is up around here. And I remember it was something like 3 Ilyushin 76s were damaged. 2 of them were destroyed. 1 was damaged to where it possibly could have been repaired. But this day is even higher than that. It is 3 confirmed Su-34s lost. And of course, we will be waiting for more pictures and video evidence to come out showing us the further loss of the other 2 Su-34s, or at least more proof of pilots ejecting. Because if we get enough pictures of pilot gear after ejection, we'll know how many aircraft were shot down, possibly. But with that, we're going to be moving on from that little bit of pictures and proof and moving on to the area of Krenki, because while the Ukrainians were pushing out and into the Aleski forest today, from what we were hearing, it does appear that the Ukrainians had an unfortunate mortar failure inside of Krenki. Luckily, nobody was killed, but it was pretty scary, nevertheless. Dude, the cameraman's just like, if I look away, it won't blow up. Just look at it. He's like, all right then. He's like, well, what a day.
He remembered that if I'm holding in the cameraman never dies, so I'll be okay.
That's true. That's true. And also, with that, we're going to be moving on, and really quickly, I just have to say, please no politics in the chat. I see some people are trying to get in here and poke this stick to start dividing people. We do not do that here. But moving on from that and into our next bit of news, we can also see near Radinsk that the Ukrainians were striking some Russian forces here with a GMLRS, most likely a HIMARS on the other side of the river, and were hitting them quite effectively. Well, you see them slamming down the fire onto them Russians, them Ruskies. And we can also see some Russian Su-25s that were active in the area today as well. Now, they put up this infographic at the end of this video. These are not Su-34s. I can just tell you that off the bat. These are like Su-25s or Su-25Ts. These are certainly not Su-34s. The wing profile doesn't match. Neither does the position of the elevators, nor the vertical stabilizer, because this aircraft only has one vertical stabilizer. The Su-34 has two, because it's based off the Su-24 fuselage. So these are Su-25s that were also operational in the area today, but we did not hear of any of those being shot down. We only heard about the Su-34s being shot down in about the number of 3. But moving on from that little bit of news, we are starting to get a very good picture of what's starting to happen here in this area based off of the trimmings of what's going on. We didn't get any exact details today. It was largely more so hearsay and rumors about what the Ukrainians are doing right now in the Krenki forests near the Aleski Sands. But based off the Russians pulling out such a high amount of air power, and not only that, their response over yesterday and today by trying to bomb Krenki with Fab 500 glide bombs or parachute bombs, we're getting a really good picture that whatever is happening in this area, the Russians are starting to pull out higher end, more valuable, and irreplaceable equipment to try and deal with the Ukrainian forces inside of that city. It's showing that it's posing a serious threat to the Russian forces in the area, and the Russians may be overwhelmed because their artillery forces apparently are no longer enough, according to the commanders in the field, to try and stop the Ukrainian push further south. Going off of all of this, this may be the only area in the entirety of the front line where a massive push can be made, and it most likely will be made by the Ukrainian side. There is one VDV division that's currently based out of the town of Korsunka and has been trying to attack into Krenki, but over the past few days, we've seen that they've gone totally inactive as far as frontline activity and are no longer engaging the Ukrainian forces. This may be suggesting that they've now pulled this VDV division off the line, and they're now preparing them to create defensive positions inside of the forests in between Krenki and the Aleski Sands. The VDV would most likely be the best unit for that job. The VDV, beyond its T-90Ms that were attached to it in Korsunka, is largely an infantry-based force and is designed to really fight without any large amounts of heavy artillery support or really any support for that matter at all. The infantry are pretty much on their own in most situations, and the division is designed that way. They're probably going to be trying to defend the area of the Krenki force, and these Russian aircraft may be used to try and buy these units some time, so that way they can try and dig in and wait for the Ukrainian offensive that's inevitably going to reach them. But nevertheless, with that, we're now going to be moving out of this area and the massive news that we got there, because it is truly amazing to hear this kind of stuff. It's great, because we've been looking at the front lines, every one of y'all have, including me, for about the past month and a half, and not really a lot's been going on. You know, some things have happened. They've been pretty big, pretty important things, but we're not seeing a lot of frontline advances from either side. In the area of Avdiivka, up at Kupiansk, near Bakhmut, in the south, there are practically minimal frontline advances. And it appears that this area here near Krenki may be the only spot that we see an advance from either side, and it looks like it's going to be favoring the Ukrainians in an advance, at least at the moment. But moving on from that little bit of news, and on into our next bit, which is actually near the Belarus border, we got to see that the Ukrainians are still laying out more minefields towards Belarus. We can see that they brought out some of the older Zils. Like, these things are ancient, actually. They painted them up, but they're still ancient Zils. And we can see them with the mine layers here in the back as they're laying out the minefields. And also razor wire as well. The Ukrainians, ever since the invasion began in February 2022, have always been concerned that the Russians may attempt another attack from the northern border with Belarus, or that the Belarusian army may join the war and begin marching into Ukraine. This is something that largely the Ukrainians probably would not be able to prepare for or expect quick enough, and it could throw off their frontline situation in other areas, because they would have to take most of, well, not most, but some of their brigades probably out of high-intensity areas of battle with the Russians, and then race them to the northern end of the country to try and deal with the Belarusians or the Russian invasion that could be coming from that area. The Ukrainians are trying to make sure that if that was to happen in the future, they would slow the advance as much as possible by laying out these minefields, and not only that, laying out razor wire and other kind of obstacles that is going to make it very difficult, even if they had numerical superiority over the Ukrainians, for the Belarusians or the Russians to advance very far into northern Ukraine. This is a fairly prudent and smart move by the Ukrainians, in my opinion, and hopefully we'll see that the Belarusians and the Russians will never attempt an offensive in the north, and these defenses were built in vain and didn't ever have to be used. But moving on from that and into the area of Nizhyn, we got to see that an OSA anti-air system was able to shoot down a Shahed drone overnight. It was a really cool little clip too, so here it is. We see the missile on its way. And they shot it down.
Ціль знищено! Азімут 165! Кут місця 02! Кут падає! Знищено!
Yes, I can see the oven is on 430.
Really, this is some old-timey gauges right here.
7200!
Oh, the OSA is old. I mean, the OSA is really old. This thing, I think, was put into service in the 70s, but let me go. OSA SAM system. There we go. Let me see here. Yeah, put into service in 1971 in the Soviet Union, so it's about a 52-year-old system. It's fairly old at this point, but still, it's doing a pretty good job against the drone, so it still serves a purpose in some way, shape, or form, but really nice to see they were able to get a drone. But moving on from that, and into our next little bit of news, near the Belgorod border, and I'm so sorry everyone that I'm stuttering tonight, gotta be honest with y'all, there's something going on with me today where I'm hardly able to speak English, so very sorry about that. But moving on to the area of Krasnopelia, we did get to see that the Russians decided to try and bombard a Ukrainian village today, although there were no military targets inside of it. According to the information, 3 civilian houses were extremely damaged from the shelling. Right now, we do not have a casualty report, so we don't know if anyone was wounded or killed.
That's a very light stream of water that guy's shooting on that fire.
Yeah, it's not really a lot. And
It's like
also,
a garden hose.
It may have been, actually. But we see the fire is now out in this clip, and it looks like they're searching through the debris to see if there were any casualties inside the building. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best we can. And we're now going to be moving on from the area of the Belgorod border and on into our location unknown. So we only have one beyond the casualty report, and it shows the Russians playing hide and seek and then losing. So check it out. I almost thought that was the Radio Moskva intro, you know, where it goes dun 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 dun.
I thought it was the Airbus like seatbelt chime.
Oh, and he just lost. There it is. He just lost the game of hide and seek.
Hey, should have buckled up like the ding ding.
And then we all know what's up. Slough. We love Slough. Shadow Wizard Money Gang. We love eating slaw. But anyways, moving on from that and on into our last bit of location unknown news, we also got the Russian casualty report over the past 24 hours, and it was a fairly significant amount of loss.
Oh, 9 Bobcats in one day. Let's go.
Let's
But
get
wait a
it.
minute, where's the planes at though?
Oh, that will be in tomorrow's report. That's it.
I got me scared for a minute. I was like, what happened?
What happened? But it's 9 Bobcat skid steers destroyed in 24 hours. Oh, man, I'm telling you. Wonderful to see, and interesting to know that the Russians have lost a high amount of special equipment vehicles again. It's starting to become a reoccurring trend, at least over the past 2 days. But moving on from that, we did get to see that the Russian casualties are remaining at a fairly consistent high, with another 1,080 troops being taken out today, along with 18 armored personnel carriers, 25 supply trucks, 9 main battle tanks, 24 artillery systems, 23 drones, and then the 3 aircraft, which are going to be accounted for in tomorrow's casualty report, because there is a little bit of a weird comeuppance with the casualty reports. You see, while it says that this is the casualty report for December 22nd, it's actually yesterday's casualty report, the casualty reports are compiled for yesterday, and then they're released as today's casualty report, based off of how the Ukrainian standard works. So tomorrow's casualty report, which will be, December 23rd, is actually all of the losses that were taken for the Russians on December 22nd, which is today. So a little confusing as far as their numbering metric goes, but nevertheless, pretty interesting to see that the Russians were able to lose such a high number of forces, and it is showing that once again the Ukrainian defensive is holding strong, and that is very important going on into this war, especially as it keeps going further and further in time, and we see that the Ukrainians and the Russians are starting to be heavily favored in defensive battles. But moving on from that and on into the northeast and the center and then the southern front, which we have a lot of clips for, we have to talk about something that is pretty big. A lot of y'all have been asking, oh, the winter sale's on, look at that. But a lot of y'all have been...
The winter sale?
Yeah, the winter sale's on, according to Steam. It just went blip, blip, and I was like, what the hell is that? But a lot of y'all have been talking about this and asking about this, and some of y'all have been asking, are we going to be having a Christmas address this year? We had one last year. Is that going to be a channel tradition? And the answer is yes. We are going to be having a Christmas address this year. We are going to be doing it almost the same as we did last year. In fact, the intro will pretty much be identical with, the same drone shot and everything, but the address will be a different one. We will be making a brand new one for this Christmas. Now, this Christmas also falls on a Monday, and that's going to kind of change how we do things with the fundraiser and everything like that. We are going to be running our normal fundraiser on Sunday night, which will be Christmas Eve. We are not going to be running a stream on Monday night. We're only going to be doing the Christmas address as a premiere at normal stream time, but on Monday, and it will probably be around 7 minutes long, maybe. There will be no fundraiser attached to it because the Christmas Eve fundraiser is going to serve as the fundraiser. So I hope that explains what's going on with that, because I've seen so many people asking very good questions that we have not answered at all about how the Christmas Eve, Christmas Day time on this channel is going to be working. But that's how it's going to work. We're going to have our Sunday fundraiser on Christmas Eve. We're going to be releasing the Christmas address without a fundraiser attached. It's just going to be the address. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And of course, with that, we're now about to be moving on into the northeastern front. I also have to take a quick pause real quick because I'm having such a hard time talking tonight. I don't know what it is. I told you all that I was having a little bit of a hard time speaking. I don't really know what it is, but I am like stressed to the floor. Like I feel right now like my blood vessels are about to burst out of my body. I'm so stressed. Don't really know what's up with that. I think it may just be a culmination of everything that we're doing, the videos, the streams, also law school coming around the corner, which Matthew and me are both dreading like the plague, amongst a million other things. I don't know what it is, but tonight it all hit me like a truck, and I'm trying to power through. So please, if I am like stuttering a lot, bear with me, because it's probably going to be for tonight only, and I'll probably be back to normal by tomorrow. But Matthew, what have people been saying in that live chat?
And all I got to say about all that is welcome to my world. But anyways, moving into our poll segment, we have 2 polls to address. And the first one says, Ukrainian forces shoot down 3 Russian fighter jets today. And what does this indicate, if anything? 63% said Russia is getting riskier with sorties. 19% said Russia simply got careless this time. 13% said, I really can't conclude anything right now. And 6% said unsure, undecided, or other. And on this one, it's kind of a tricky question because 3 fighter jets getting shot down in one day, we could excuse one as being an accident, but since it was 3, it sounds like they might be getting riskier with their sorties, which is why 3 got shot down at the same time. But of course, I don't have anything to back that up at the moment because it just happened today, and we'll have to see over time if the Russians come up with some kind of lame excuse as to why that occurred, or if the Ukrainians capture those Russian pilots and are able to interrogate them. We can find out that way as well. But I'm going with the 63%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that the loss of 3 Su-34s is indicating that the Russians are starting to conduct riskier air operations given the environment of the air defense over Ukraine for both sides because of what's happening in the area around Krinky at the moment. We have seen over yesterday and today that Russian air operations are certainly ramping up against the Ukrainian Marine brigades that are currently fighting around Krinky, and I think that this is showing that they're making a large amount of progress for this kind of air support to be pulled out. It's rarely ever pulled out for anything. We hardly even saw the Russian Air Force being used during the Ukrainian offensive in the middle of the summer this year, and that was a major offensive with a lot of moving parts, and the Russian Air Force would have been well used in a situation like that, yet they didn't even pull them out then. We're seeing them pull them out now, and I think it's showing that the Russians are very concerned about the Ukrainian forces pushing further out of Krenki, and they're trying to stop that and pull out everything possible to make that happen. And I don't think it's going to really work for them in the long run. But with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our second poll says, do you think the Russians will launch a rescue mission to retrieve the fighter pilots? 51% said no, Russia would not do that. 23% said yes, Russia will attempt it. 20% said likely not, but possible. And 6% said unsure. And like I said earlier, I don't think the Russians are going in to retrieve these fighter pilots. Now, of course, the pilots are very valuable. They don't have a ton of them. And also, the Russians are probably even harder to train than any other military's pilots because the Russians aren't exactly what you'd call quick learners. So on that front, I'm sure they'd love to have them back. But the Russians know better than to go look for them because they know they'll get shot down just like the 3 jets did before. And they can't risk having any more aircraft losses. So I think they're pretty much fending for themselves at this point, which is good news for the Ukrainians because they can go find them and catch them and ask them some questions in a very forceful way. But Enforcer, what say you?
I don't think the Russian pilots are going to be rescued. Usually, whenever pilots fall behind enemy lines, they're kind of left to their own defense, to their own devices. That isn't always the case. Sometimes, like for example, during World War II, especially in the Pacific, whenever a pilot was shot down on the U.S. side, there was actually a pretty well put together effort to try and find them and recover them and bring them back so that way they can be used again. That was something that was pretty common in the Pacific, but in other places, like for example, in the European theater of World War II, it was next to never that there was ever a rescue operation made for a pilot. Usually whenever pilots fall behind the lines, they're left on their own. And in fact, usually pilot training involves let's see, what is it called, Matthew? It's SEER training. It's
SEER?
search.
It's like when they get struck down and stuff, how to resist the interrogation and the survival and all that.
Yeah, it's how to try and evade enemy forces, how to try and get out of enemy territory, and if you end up being captured, how to resist interrogation as best as you physically can. That's something that is taught to all U.S. pilots in the U.S. Air Force. It's called SEER training. It's also taught to Special Forces as well, and it's also taught, I believe, to some other units, pilots and also the Special Forces of most branches. But outside of all that, usually... Go ahead.
We had just a little bit of lag, but I was about to say, anybody that flies on an aircraft in the Air Force goes through SEER training in the modern day.
Yeah, but there's also some other people who do as well, because I know the Green Berets, Delta Force, the SEALs, and some other groups. Let's see here. I'm trying to think of all the Special Forces units. I can't think of them all right now off the top of my head. They all go through SEER training as well, but I'm a little bit of a loss as to everyone who goes through SEER training. But at the same time, it's a pretty common thing for a lot of these groups to do, especially pilots. And then speaking about the Russians, we do know that the Russians actually have some kind of a SEER training that they give their pilots. We just don't really have a lot of information about what that involves. But moving out of all of that, these pilots are probably going to be left to their own devices. It's going to be up to them to figure out how to try and evade the Ukrainians, which are patrolling for them and trying to find them, and to try and resist interrogation as best as possible once they're captured, if they are. Going through all of that, I have a feeling the Russians will not be making a rescue attempt for these guys. It's going to be up to them to either try and escape out of Ukrainian territory or to, give themselves up to the Ukrainians and try and not give away any information that would be vital. At least that's what I think at the moment. And also, everyone's bringing up different Special Forces groups. Let's see, Navy SEALs, Delta Force, the Marine Recon, that was one of the ones that I was thinking. And then the Air Force has its own version as well, but I'm forgetting their name. But with that, we are on to the next one.
You want to know the name of the Air Force Special Forces unit?
Yeah, they have some people who are like hella-born, but I forget their name.
It's let's see, what's their name? Para something. It's like a para rescue or something like that. In the Air Force, I don't know the name. I think they literally just call it Air Force Special Forces. Okay, yeah, that rings a bell.
Let me see. Let me make sure. I think it's MARSOC, isn't it? I can't find anything quickly about it. I can find AFSOC, Air Force Special Operations Command Aviators. And Marsoc, wait a minute. I think that's the Marines. I don't know. We'll have to figure that out later. Let us know in the chat all of the special forces units because I'm seeing all of
The
y'all listening.
PJs.
Oh yeah, the pajamas. But anyways, moving on
The
from that,
parajumpers.
we are into the next one.
All right, and with that being said, also someone said Marsoc is the Marines, so I really didn't know, to be honest with you. I thought Marsoc was Air Force for a second, but I guess it's AFSOC. Who would have known? Not me. But anyways, moving on from our poll segment, we're moving into our super chats because we're fresh out of polls, and the first one is going to go to Mark the Kinetic Possum, who's back once again, and welcome back, Kinetic Possum back. Mark. He throws in a $170 donation, and huge thanks for that massive support, Mark. And also, I hope you're enjoying your time at the beach, because I'd like to be at the beach too, but we can't be at the beach because we're so busy. But anyways, Mark says, I'm surprised to see the Su-34 shot down on the Ukrainian side, because I thought they were launching the FABs, and that means they needed altitude. TI get distance.
And that is a good point, Mark. And really quickly, there's actually many different delivery systems for the Fab 500, which is the Russians' 500 kilogram bomb, which is usually actually the biggest bomb that the Russians ever practically use. It actually weighs about 1,100 pounds, so it's the equivalent to a US 1,000-pound bomb. But outside of that, there are several delivery systems for the Fab, which it's not fabulous, but nevertheless, there is what they call the parachute high explosive bomb, and these are particularly made like a normal Fab 500, kind of like these right here, but there's a parachute pack that is attached to the rear of the bomb, so that way when it's dropped, the parachute pack is activated, and it's able to pretty much stop midair and fall directly onto its target. That's largely how it works in a very short explanation. We actually saw the Russians use these parachute bombs on the Freedom of Russia Legion when they were crossing the border at Terebrino in the Belgrade Oblast, although they missed with them by like 50, well, not 50, it was more like 100 yards. And so they didn't end up getting any of the Freedom of Russia Legion guys. But outside of that, from what we were hearing today, it appears that the Russians were not using the Fab 500 glide bombs, like this one right here that has the glide kit attached to it. And this looks jank as hell. Look at those weld joints. That is atrocious.
That does look janky. Good. They did a better job on the like the painting on the front of it than they did the weld joints.
Dude, that thing right there is what an American welder looks like when he sees the weld quality on the glide kits. Like he's like going and having a spasm. But beyond that,
someone break out the credit card, the baking soda, and go ahead and give it some.
What the hell? Okay, all right. But beyond that, from what we're hearing, they were most likely using the parachute bombs, and that's why they ended up being shot down over Ukrainian territory. The turning radius of an Su-34 can actually be pretty good if it's able to turn in well, but I think the turning radius is still somewhere around like a mile or a little less than a mile near supersonic speeds. It may even be greater than that. So let's see if we can measure out the distance here from the center of Krenki to about over here. So this is actually 3.2 kilometers. So this entire area is the equivalent of about 2 miles or so. So going off of that, we can maybe take a guess that the Su-34s were trying to come in over the woods directly at the Ukrainian forces. They would drop the glide bombs, fly pretty much tree level over the marsh and then towards Ukrainian territory, and then try and hook a sharp left turn and back over past Casualty and back into Russian territory or Russian controlled territory. And that's probably what we can assume off of that, because somehow, some way, they did end up being shot down from what we heard, all of them over Ukrainian territory. So going off of that, I guess that their flight plan or their attack pattern just led them to flying an extra mile or two into Ukrainian territory and then trying to make the turn, and that ended up spelling disaster for them trying to evade. Someone said, you don't drop bombs supersonic. That's true. But when you can drop the bombs close to supersonic, you know, you can do that. You can be at like 700 miles an hour and drop them then. But usually I think the usual speed the bombs are dropped at for an Su-34 is somewhere around 500 to 550 miles per hour, if I remember correctly. But, you know, still, you can get very close to supersonic speeds and still drop the bombs. It is entirely possible. But nevertheless, I hope that does address that the best I can, because it is weird to think that they're doing that. And also, I think they're not using the Fab 500 glide bombs as much as they were a while ago, because it does appear that they're not that effective. We've seen them end up being somewhat inaccurate and missing targets by nearly a half kilometer. So I think they tried to go with the parachute bombs instead, because with the pilots being able to visually see the target and pretty much drop the bombs directly onto them, they were thinking that the accuracy may be improved based off of everything that we're hearing. And we don't really know if it was or wasn't, because we haven't gotten any reports or information about how effective the parachute bombs really were. But with that, I hope that does address that very well, and thank you so much for the massive amount of support, Mark, and helping this channel to keep on running, and also being the Kinetic Possum. I like that nickname. That one's actually pretty cool. And also, I gotta thank you so much, Mark, for being one of the folks who enjoys this channel massively and also helps to support it, because folks like you help to make this thing possible, and we are greatly appreciative to people who go out of their way to support the channel, because y'all make this thing possible, and you make it possible for us to not only keep this channel running, but also to try and do other projects like our gun reviews, and hopefully everyone will really enjoy the one we have coming out tomorrow. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Marion Deemert, who puts in a $30 donation. And thank you, as always, Marion, for that support. Hey! And Marion says, Merry Christmas. Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas.
And Merry Christmas to you, Marion. Oh, man, I'm telling you. But nevertheless, Merry Christmas to you, Marion, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep running. Like I've said, it is folks like you who help to keep this channel possible, and I thank you so much once again. We run ad-free and sponsor-free. We're the only channel on the platform at this point that I know of that ends up running war coverage, sponsor-free and ad-free. It's absolutely incredible to know that y'all continue, out of y'all's generosity alone, to support this channel and help us to keep this thing running, Marion, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be on air just because of how we run. And so thank you so much once again, and thank you for wishing us Merry Christmas. We wish all of y'all a Merry Christmas as well, and we also hope y'all have a Happy New Year. I know we'll be on air for that, because I think New Year's Eve and New Year's Day are both streaming days. But with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one and the last one of this segment.
And the last one of the segment is going to go to Jason Carpenter, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Jason, as well, for that support. He says, hi, guys, and I can't believe we've been here for almost 2 years now, and I was wondering about your thoughts on the Battlefield adaptation that we've been witnessing. And happy holidays to you both, and to all of the LSA, and you're killing it, bro. You're killing it. Hey. And Merry Christmas to you, Jason.
Merry Christmas to you, Jason, as well. And thank you for saying we're killing it. I gotta be honest, I'm so freaking stressed tonight. I feel like I'm not necessarily killing it. I feel like I'm a little demure. But nevertheless, I thank you so much for enjoying it tonight and helping us keep the thing rolling. And also the kind words. To answer that, well, to answer the first part, to answer it bit by bit from first to last, it is insane to think it's been nearly 2 years. That's absolutely crazy to think that we've been doing this so long. We're going to be doing a second Christmas address here, and all of y'all have been around for the first one, well before the first one even came around, and now we're going to be here again. It's kind of great and kind of sad in two ways. It's sad to know the wars lasted so long, that we've been around for 2 years, but it's also amazing to think that this incredible community is still as strong as it was at the start, nearly 2 years later. Beyond our streams here and there that got up to like 70 or 80,000 views, and our biggest streams, they got up to 250,000 views, this channel has consistently gotten somewhere in between 40,000 to 50,000 views on every single stream we've ever run. And it is unbelievable to think that all of y'all have been here. Pretty much the same folks have been here since the start, watching this channel and watching us cover the news. And it's truly unbelievable to think, and it's truly unbelievable to think how much time has gone by. When we started this channel, I was rounding out my sophomore year in undergrad, and I was moving on to being a junior. Now, we are going into our second semester of law school and absolutely hating every moment of it. And it's crazy to think that y'all were here during this entire time, and we've been doing this for that long. It's also crazy as well, because there are people I knew at the beginning of the channel that were like, you know, they had like a kid, and the kid was like 4 years old. Now this kid's like 6 years old, and like the kid's like actually in like school and stuff. One of the people in the reenacting group, I remember I did reenacting with them a lot, all the way up until the this war really kicked off and the channel really kicked off, and then I got incredibly busy. And then I went and hung out with them a year ago last time I went reenacting with them a year ago, and this kid had grown up so much in between. I was like, dang, time's passed, and time's really passed now. It's just insane to look back and think about it, and think about how long we've been doing this. But nevertheless, I got to thank you so much for being here with us the entire time, and supporting this channel and helping us to keep it running. And also, to address your second part, the evolutions that we're seeing on the battlefield are they're very different than every evolution we've seen before. But it's under the same premise, to mitigate the casualties of your own forces and to increase the casualties of others. And we've seen that the Ukrainians have certainly been trying to do that a lot more than the Russians, because in reality, manpower for the Ukrainians is far more expensive than it is for the Russians. The Russians do outnumber the Ukrainians population-wise 3 to 1, and their conscriptable population also outnumbers the Ukrainians 3 to 1. So going off of that, it's very important for the Ukrainians long-term to adapt and make sure that their manpower is conserved as best as possible, hopefully, in their minds, at least to a factor of 3 compared to the Russians, so that way in the end they are able to last the war out as long as the Russians casualty-wise. So going off of that, we've seen that the Ukrainians have been trying to make more remote technological systems, like multiple different kinds of drones, whether it be wheeled or air drone. They've been trying to create ways for the infantryman to be out of the line of fire and out of danger as much as they possibly can. And it does appear that they've been really doing quite effective at that. Although there's still a lot to be done, and they're always constantly trying to improve and adapt, because they also want to be as cheap as possible to do something like that. And so far, it looks like they're doing pretty well, but there's still a lot more to go, because from what we know, just based off of a rough approximate, the Russians have been losing, the Ukrainians have been losing probably around 100 to 200 soldiers per day, compared to the Russians about 1,000 per day. So right now, they are on a kill-to-death ratio with the Russians. They are losing 1 soldier for every 5 the Russians are losing, which is good. It's actually above the ratio they need, but they still need to try and improve it further, because every soldier they lose is someone that's not going to be in Ukraine once the war is over. And while this sounds almost like we're cutting this down into units in a game, that's really how a government is going to look at this, and especially the Ukrainian government. Every single man or woman that dies in this war is not going to be contributing to the Ukrainian economy afterwards. And also, not only that, it's not going to be contributing to the Ukrainian population pool afterwards, which is already having massive reverberations from the Second World War, due to nearly, I believe it was like a quarter of the Soviet male population being wiped out over the course of those 4 years and never recovering from that. So going off of all of those things, we can get a good idea that the Ukrainians are trying to adapt to mitigate the losses on their end as best as possible, while also maximizing the losses of Russian forces on the other side. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and thank you so much for asking some very interesting questions and also supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And Matthew, was that the last question of this segment?
And das was the last one of this segment.
And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into our next bits of news in the war in Ukraine, starting off in the area of Avdiivka, where we got to see some of the Russians hanging out in the area. Oh, wait a minute.
Look at that.
Well, you see some Russians hopping off of this BMP. But it appears that this guy got his sleeve stuck, and he's going for a ride. Oh, my heavens.
He's getting the road rash.
That was brutal. And there he goes. Oh, wait, he got off.
He got lucky.
He got off. He's lucky. He's getting a walk. But with that, that's the end of that clip right there.
He probably didn't even get road rashed, really, because that snow probably, like, insulated him. Unless there was, like, a stick poking up or something, he might have gotten, a little unfortunate with that, but probably not road rashed, at least.
Oh, my balls. Moving on from that.
What was that?
Moving on from that into our next clip, we also got to see a martyr crossing a river. We actually got to see a group of martyrs crossing a river. These are German APCs that have been in Ukrainian service since about the early part of this year, and it's really cool to see them just fording this river. Look at them go. Pretty cool little APCs, and not really much more to note about that picture beyond that. But moving on into our next picture, we also got to see, well, not next picture, but next video, we also got to see the 30th Mechanized Brigade filming a failed Russian assault near Avdiivka. We're going to be muting the rap music because while it be absolutely bussin' for real, we can't play it because of copyright. Wow, that's a lot of BMPs. Let's see, 1, 2 tanks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we're seeing about a third of the entire battalion tactical group assaulting this area right now in this clip. It's being led by a Russian tank with a mine plow. It's firing as they continue their advance. If that one tank in the front with the mine plow gets knocked out, this offensive is going to completely collapse, most likely. We now see this tank veer off the beaten path, which is a severe mistake. That's why they have the mine clear. And now we can see all of them veering off the beaten path. This is most likely going to be a disaster. Oh, wait a minute. I think our mine clearer up there actually just ran over a mine and blew it up. And we can see it's still trucking, as the rest of the column is now advancing onto Avdiivka. We now see them dismounting troops. This is also where we're about to see this guy get stuck to the back of the BMP. Oh, we can almost see a collision there with the T-72 and that BMP. We now see them dismounting.
Getting a little nervous.
Oh, man! But we see them dismounting the infantry. And we
Look
see
at all the Russians just running everywhere like ants. They don't even have a clue where they're going. Look at that traffic jam. Like, oh my god.
Oh, and the tank ran over a house.
They keep just backing forward, backing up, going forward, backing up.
And this is where the guy got stuck. So we're seeing it again. So there he goes. He's going on a little trip. Dude, it's
the other tanks just sitting back there looking like, okay. Well, anyways.
Dude, that driver was sitting there looking out of his periscopes, and he just saw this guy getting dragged, and he heard, "Stop, lad!" And he just sat there and just watched it, and he went out of view, and he's like, "Oh, that's kind of weird." Anyways. We see the guy finally got free. And now we see all the BMPs leaving the infantry behind.
Oh, that was ran the guy over too. He's like, I just got drugged for like 30 meters, blood. Can please help? And they're driving past like, oh, see you, Tony.
I see the Russians here in this house. They actually got spread out across this entire street by the APCs. And it appears that they lost 3 BMPs right there. They all got hit by artillery or ATGMs on the way out, so now they're being abandoned. So we've seen that 10% of the battalion tactical group has just lost its armored personnel carriers. We can see the main battle tank leaving, and now we can see that the Ukrainians have pulled out their BMP-2, and it looks like their BMP-2 has a little bit extra kick to it because they're greasing the Russians with a 30mm 2A42 autocannon. I gotta tell you, those autocannons on the BMP-2s are mean when you watch them shooting.
They're literally chopping down trees as they're firing.
Oh, and when you see the Ukrainians are here now, the actual infantry has arrived.
Oh, those guys don't stand a chance.
They don't stand a chance because whatever. Well, let's go back and see what happened here. So something had exploded in that part of the clip. You see this guy holding the corner. At some point, a grenade was chucked in there because a grenade landed literally in the center of all those Russians and looks to have got all of them. We don't know where that came from, though, because it didn't come from the soldier on film. But with that, that's the end of the clip and showing another failed Russian offensive into Avdiivka, pretty much summarized by pure chaos and hell, summarized in the winter. But moving on from that into the area of Casualty, we also got to see a T-64BV on the move. This is the Ukrainian equivalent to a Russian T-80. There are T-80s that are in Ukrainian service, but the T-64 series main battle tanks are a lot more common, at least on the Frontline service. We can see it just driving through the snow. Is that a Corgi?
Is it?
He kind of looks
like a fox.
That looks a
That
lot
looks like a fox,
Corgi.
actually.
No, I'm pretty sure that's a Corgi right there.
I'm laying money on it's a fox. What's a Corgi doing out here anyway?
Man, what the Corgi doing with the tank behind? Dude, that's Mr. Corgi going, I brought in fire support. But interesting. Very, very
Dog's
interesting.
like Paul Revere or something. He said, the British are coming, the British are coming.
Nah, man, he's down there, give me dog food. But anyways, moving on from that.
No.
Moving on from that and into our next clip near Kuzmiivka, we also got to see the Russian forces being hunted down. with some horror music playing. Man, I'm itching to show everyone that YouTube short we made.
Me too. I'm itching too, but you can't do it in Force. You can't do it.
Man, I want to, man. I feel like it would hype up I feel like it would hype them all up. I feel like it'd hype all of y'all up to see the short that we made. It's pretty much our intro to the video, but you know, it's really cool. I just wish we could show it to y'all. Man, I wonder.
Leave them waiting. Make them wait.
Oh, we can see them drop the bomb, like getting 2 of them, and there goes the other 2 running for the hills.
Oh, I'm seeing a lot of red on the screen, bliat. Oh, 200 points.
200. We got 400 points. And it looks like the other 2 went running.
They got 0 for them.
And now we got the Marriott logo. Interest. Anyways, that's the end of that clip right there. But real nice to see. Love to see it. And moving on from that little clip and on into our next one, a little bit further down from that area of the front. Also, by the way, really quickly, let me take y'all to a frontline analysis in this area, show y'all the past 24 hours. We have seen that the Russians have made no advances in the northeastern area over the past 24 hours, according to Deep State UA. Moving on down into the area of Bakhmut itself and towards the direction of Avdiivka, we got to see that the Russian forces were getting hit incredibly hard by the 10th Separate Mountain Assault Battalion. Because while it says the 8th Separate Mountain Assault Battalion, the patch that you're going to see right here is actually for the 10th. Well, actually, sorry, up here, it's for the 10th. So this means that this is in the northern area of Bakhmut. Well, you can see that APC rolling across the field. We can see the Russians now dismounting the APCs. It appears to be a scene of chaos as usual. It doesn't really appear... Oh, well, now it's really a scene of chaos. One of the BMPs has already been knocked out, and it appears that the fuel tank inside of the crew compartment has caught on fire. The second APC was also destroyed as well at some point, although it hasn't burned up. Man, I see a lot of people wanting to see that little short.
That little short, I'm telling you.
A little shout.
You know what, Enforcer? You know what? Since a lot of people are wanting to see it and stuff like that, I guess it would be a good opportunity to make sure that we don't have any copyright issues with our music. So, I mean, you know, if you want to show, I mean, guess go right ahead.
Well, I guess we will right after this clip is done. And we can see that the soldiers of the 10th Brigade have now dismounted and are attacking the Russian forces here in this dugout. We can see the Russians are climbing out, actually, and trying to retreat. It appears that some of them will not be retreating, and it also seems as though these Russians are coming under some kind of automatic grenade fire, possibly. This is a damn lot of Russians to be retreating from just 2 Ukrainians.
And they're all rolling around.
Oh, wallow in the field! Wait, hang on, I gotta pull out those Volodymyr Sololoviv lines that he would use on the Ukrainians. Roll in the field, you Russian swine! Schultz! Schultz! But we can see them moving on.
Yeah, Schultz.
Ukrainians are laying low. It appears that they're still lobbing nades at the Russians as they continue to retreat.
And those are the Russians over there on the left, right?
Oh, the Russians are up top, on the top side of the screen. The Ukrainians are the ones who are in the lighter camo. Oh, look, they got some.
Oh, and they taped their eyes shut. The best way.
Просимо про пробачення, Україна, пробач.
All right, well, hey, they got a couple of prisoners. They ended up running away, practically a platoon. Not bad. Not bad at all. They actually did a pretty damn good job at taking that Russian attack and turning it into a Ukrainian counterattack. Pretty successful. However, I will have to say this. We have seen something a little bit concerning on the Deep State map. It does appear that the Russians were able to make a general push towards Chasiv Yar today and took a pretty decent amount of ground. In some areas, it was about a half kilometer of an advance deep. We have never seen an advance like this on the Bakhmut front for about the past 8 months, and it is a little bit concerning to see this kind of an advance coming around. But still, pretty interesting to note. And we have a bit of a push and pull, y'all. A bit of a push and pull. 66% of y'all want to see the YouTube shorts. The little short. And then Matthew's on the phone. He's like, don't do it, man. He's like, don't do it. On God.
I don't know. I had second thoughts about it. I was thinking, I think if we show the YouTube short right now, people might see the intro and recognize it and might think, I've already seen this already. And then they might click off of it and not watch the whole thing.
Well, the YouTube short's kind of more so for promoting us to audiences who may not have seen us yet. The videos for the folks here, and they will not certainly have seen a lot of the video. Y'all will only see, I think, like 20 real seconds of the video that's actually in it. The video's 10 minutes long, so there would still be a lot for y'all to see tomorrow. The YouTube short's kind of like an appetizer. And considering that a lot of y'all...
Give them some appetizer. Go ahead and do it. Just do it.
Let's give them some appetizing. I don't think you will be able to see this. I'm not sure, but let me go whip out the short. Can you see this?
It says stream paused. The enforcer has minimized their application. Sit tight.
Ah, dang, you won't be able to see it then, but here's our short for the AK-74 video that's coming out tomorrow. So, sadly, Matthew will not be able to see it on his screen, but y'all will be able to see it. So, here we go. And I'll try and explain a little bit of what we're seeing. Well, actually, Matthew, you've seen it before. You know what it is. But here it is. And also, by the way, there will be a dub over from me to give some, like, explanation behind the short. Actually, dang. Yeah, I don't have that in this one. You know what? We'll just play this, and I'll just let y'all see this version of it. But here we go. And that's the end of the short. But
hey, yeah, baby, I can even see it. I'm already so hyped. Let's go.
Let's get it, baby! But nevertheless, it's going to be a really cool video. That was our, not really like the whole intro. There's actually more to the intro than that in the actual video. But I hope y'all really enjoy that greatly, because it's going to be a cool video tomorrow. I hope that excites y'all a little bit about what we got, because that's just a very small part of the video, and there's a lot more to it than just that. But I see a lot of y'all that are like, you're a lefty? Yeah. I'm a lefty. But let's see. And BC Skyman loved it. Goat said, very dramatic. Thank you. And George Singer said, there we go. I'm Gift Bearer said, cool music. A lot of y'all are really liking it. A lot of y'all are really loving it. I'm happy to see that. If y'all love that, y'all are probably going to love the rest of the video, because there is a lot more to it, and it is really good all the way through. And we also tied in a little bit to how it's being used in Ukraine right now in the video. So make sure to be here at 4 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow, and you'll be able to see the entire 10-minute video that we made about it. But with that, we're going to be moving on into the area of northern Kherson again and talking about that general push that we saw. From what we are hearing, it appears that the Ukrainians are trying to create a more advantageous defensive position near Avdiivka, which is a smaller village-like settlement on the northern end of Bakhmut. This is not the best thing that we've seen. Of course, giving up ground is not a great thing overall, and also our stream has been flatlined here, so let's give it a second, and we should be back, and there we go. But anyways, moving on from that, we're now going to be getting to our one clip from the area showing some of the Russian soldiers that got hit during this general advance, but that was removed, so we won't be able to watch that clip. Moving on from that and a little bit further south towards Klishkivka, we did get to see that the Ukrainians were firing a BMW grad at the Russians based out of the area of Avdiivka. So here's the clip. Man, get him with that BMW!
Man, the last time a BMW was shooting off missiles, a bad fellow with a mustache was in charge.
Oh no! Slow. Yeah, so I'd like some slow right now, please. But anyways, moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see an upgraded BMP-1 that was knocked out. And this BMP-1 actually had an automated 30mm grenade launcher turret mounted onto the back, and it appears that even this modified version of the BMP was not able to survive the Ukrainian front lines. Also, y'all, I'm so sorry. That's actually the 30mm automatic cannon. I'm a little goofy. Sorry. We can also see this piece of rubble on the back, which I mistakenly said was the 30mm grenade launcher. And after I said that, I was like, that can't be right. And then I saw the turret, and I was like, oh, damn. I got it wrong. Anyways, moving on from that and into our next clip outside of the Bakhmut area, it's now time for us to get on down into the front lines of Avdiivka. And so with that, we are going to be moving on into the area of Stepove. So let me show you what's been going on down here over the past 24 hours. It appears that the Russians have been able to move 30 yards within the small tree line here, but beyond that there has been no advances on the Avdiivka front, showing that the Ukrainians have been able to once again successfully mount a proper defense of the area. This is a very important thing, especially over the past 24 hours that there's been no frontline movements, because a winning side of the battle for Ukraine is that there is absolutely no frontline movements whatsoever. It is showing that the Ukrainians are mounting a successful defense. And so with that, we're moving on to our first clip near Stepove, where we got to see a Bradley firing on them Russians. Here's the clip. When you see the Bradley's autocannon salting and peppering that tree line. And look at that. That high explosive firepower of the Bradley's 25mm Bushmaster, a very impressive autocannon mounted onto an incredible armored personnel carrier. One of the best infantry fighting vehicles in the world, I would say. And George, don't feed into that left-handed intelligence stuff. I've seen a lot of left-handed people that are pretty damn dumb. I'm probably one of those people too. So, you know, anyways, with that, we're going to be moving on from the area of Stepove and into the area of Kamyanka, where we got to see that a little Russian party was hit. They were having a little impromptu party, you know, having fun on the front. Looks like that got ended fast. We can see right here, the Russians having the party, seeing the drone coming in, thinking it's joining them, but alas, it was not. It was, in fact, ending the party. Oh my. But with that, that's the end of the clip right there, and, you know, y'all can put together the rest of what happened. Moving on from that, we also got a very interesting video today from United 24 speaking about the defense of Avdiivka and the Battle of Avdiivka as a whole. And so, without further ado, here's the clip.
Just in front of us, we can see the notorious Casualty plant. Obviously, we're approaching the city of Avdiivka, which is now the hottest spot of the Ukrainian front line. We were told to keep our windows open so we can hear anything that flies towards our direction, let it be FPV or plane or anything. And we are planning to meet and talk to several soldiers who are defending Avdiivka at the moment.
The battle for the city began on October 10th, when Russia launched a massive offensive from 3 directions: north, around the city of Stepove and towards Koksahim, the largest coke production plant in Ukraine; east via the main road leading to occupied Donetsk; south via the village of Vodine. The goal to encircle and capture Avdiivka, and also to draw Ukrainian resources from other parts of the front line. Due to Russia's continuous use of mortars, artillery, and large glide bombs against civilian targets, access to the city center is restricted for media. So we travel to the outskirts to meet with those who are summoned when the going gets tough, Ukraine's Special Operation Forces. So far the city is holding. The situation is stable but extremely tense. According to US intelligence, Russia has already lost more than 13,000 personnel along the Avdiivka-Novopavlivka axis. Godzilla, an SOF operator, has witnessed the fierce battles firsthand.
After we started pounding them, they changed their tactics slightly. The statistics provided by the General Staff reflect the reality, I can assure you of that, and Russian prisoners of war will confirm the heavy losses. It's safe to say they are advancing right over the bodies of their colleagues. Once their equipment and personnel thinned out a bit, they divided their units into smaller components and began assaulting from different directions.
While the fighting is heavy everywhere, the Koksahim coke plant has become the heart of the battle. Russia is sparing no cost to capture it.
It's quite possible that they perceive Koksahim as their second Azovstal, something sacred to them. Perhaps that's the case. Or it might be a political issue, that's very likely too. To take Avdiivka, to take the plant before the 2024 elections.
Just like before, Russia is relying on seemingly endless resources, both in terms of machinery and human life. Griffith is responsible for interrogating newly captured prisoners of war. He has shared videos of men they recently captured in Avdiivka.
These new batches of conscripts and contractors typically represent society's lowest. What I mean is, due to a shortage of qualified resources and citizens subject to conscription, this year, Russia launched an extensive recruiting campaign for contract service, typically motivating individuals with money. These are people who face imprisonment, people in debt, individuals who haven't found any fulfillment in life.
Работал с марта этого года в ЖЭКе. Денег мало было, ну, как бы, жена, ребенок. Ну, и она говорит, надо уже менять, ну, как вместо работы, денег не хватает.
Literally those without homes or alcoholics from the streets.
Сначала с работы уволили, безработный, бухал, потом и пил на место. И так как-то пошел в военкомат, сразу в тот же день на комиссию пошел.
Still, relying on large amounts of poorly trained conscripts can work. Every single enemy soldier is a problem for the Ukrainian army. And while the world was focused on the Ukrainian counteroffensive, Russia was gathering men in the hope of turning the tables with offensives like Avdiivka. Still, Godzilla and Griffith have no doubt that Avdiivka will hold.
For a while, we focused more on attacking. So perhaps in some areas, we didn't think about defense as much. But now we see that we need to work in all directions. We have to understand that this is war, that this is the front line. It can shift, with us making slight advances in some places and pulling back in others. But overall, we're maintaining our defense and doing it successfully.
As 2023 is coming to an end and the war is entering its third winter, Ukraine's future remains uncertain. The battle for Avdiivka shows that Russia isn't becoming weaker, it's growing stronger. So only an even stronger Ukraine can manage to secure freedom for its people, and for the rest of Europe alike.
And with that,
You don't even media, I'm telling you, they make a good video.
oh man, I've got to tell you, they make the sickest video. But nevertheless, we are seeing that, of course, the offensive that the Russians are conducting in Avdiivka is creating a pretty strenuous situation for the Ukrainian defenders, but hopefully they will be able to conduct the defensive like they have been for about the past 4 months and continue to hold the Russians at bay exactly where they are, not a step back. But, you know, of course, steps back will be made in real life. That's only realistic. You know, stopping forces from retreating is somewhat stupid and a little suicidal in the in the long term. But moving on from that and into the area around Lozove, we did get to see a Russian soldier getting hit with an FPV drone. He decided to 1v1 the FPV drone and he lost. Here's the clip. Can you see the rain? But anyways, you can see the drone coming in. The Russian has his gun out like a bat and looks to be throwing it at the drone, but he was a little slow. And it appears that the drone still weaved under him. It weaved under the hit and slammed right into him. Good night, Russian. And so with that, that's the end of the clip right there. And with that, we're now moving on from that little clip and further down the line and into our next one, because we didn't really get a large amount of frontline changes or information from the Marinka battlefield today. It appears to largely be inactive. However, at Novomikhailivka, it does appear that the Russians are attempting to create a small advance in this area, but it has been thwarted multiple days in a row. And we can see that a Russian MTLB ran over a mine in this area and ended up being lost. We're going to be muting the epic cool lo-fi music. And actually, correction, that is not an MTLB, that is a BMP-1. The caption is incorrect.
And it's chuffing, I'm telling you. It's like a freight train down here. Well, we got the Polar Express.
Aw, man. I'd have to tell you, man, there's got to be some people in there who are hotboxing that thing. Goodness gracious. I bet you the driver can't see crap with all that smoke inside of that tank.
They're suddenly getting the urge to sell a hot dog or two.
I'm telling you what, man. Oh, and the hot dog is sold. The hot dog has been sold. I repeat, the hot dog is sold. The BMP is going off the road.
We want our hot dogs cooked well done.
In this house, we only accept hot dogs cooked well. But we can see one Russian running for it. That actually was an MTLB. And we now see him trying to hide behind a tank. A knocked out Russian tank. We see the drone dropping a bomblet and getting him too. Nobody escapes. Everyone loses. It's kind of fair. It's like everyone wins, but everyone loses instead. Moving on from that clip at Novomikhailivka and towards Mikilsky, we also got to see that they were able to take out a Sturm ATGM. This is actually pretty cool. We rarely ever get to see a Russian Sturm. These were an anti-tank kind of a system made during the Cold War. And we see this drone from the 72nd coming right on down and smacking into it quite evenly. Oh! Oh! Someone call the insurance appraiser. This is a total.
Man, someone call State Farm because they thought they saw a thing or two, but they hadn't seen this. I mean, I'm telling you.
Man, call the opposite of State Farm because they are not there. They are no longer there. They are gone. But with that, we're moving on from that little bit of news and on into our next bit. A little bit further down the lines near Novosibirsk, where we got to see some BM-27 Uragans being targeted and blasted. I bet y'all will like this one. Oh. Well, we can see the grad. Oh, I mean the Uragan. Sorry, I call everything a grad these days, but they're Uragans. We see that one smoking. That one's absolutely broiling. Oh, wait a minute. Hang on.
Oh.
I swear we saw this thing do the same thing yesterday. Is this a duplicate clip? Yep, it's a duplicate because it did it a second time. This is a duplicate clip. Sorry about that, everyone. I thought it was brand new, but we're actually going to be getting rid of that because keeping that around and saying that another Uragan was destroyed today would not be accurate. Moving on from that and into the area of Novoprokopivka and Solotka Balka, we also got to see that a FPV drone was able to hit some Ruski soldat. Oh, блядь! Oh, oh, he's backing up. He's going for it. So what happened, y'all? So this Ural was driving in to resupply these Russian soldiers. One of them saw the drone coming in, and he went, and then the drone hit the truck and knocked it out. So let y'all hear this Russian scream again. Dude, it's like a freaking comedy routine. He's like, oh no, a table! Boof! And then the truck just starts backing out of the town. Why is it all so quiet? It's literally like comedy noises dubbed in. You know, there's no sound. It's just a guy screams and a boom, and that's the only noise. Oh, man. The explosion happening literally after the guy gets done screaming just adds to it a little bit. We're going to remember this guy for a while. But anyways, moving on from that clip, great to see their supplies were knocked out in the area for the day. And with that, we've actually covered everything. So we're now moving on to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. I don't know why I called this the Russian losses. This is a speech. So let me go and rename this.
Because every time Zelensky speaks is a Russian loss. I'm telling you, his words alone makes the Russians lose.
Yeah, you know it. You know what I mean.
I'm telling you. Hello, my friends.
Oh, oh, whoa. But anyways, here's the speech. Or as they call it, the peach.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Важливий день. Дякую нашим воїнам, які знищили одразу 3 російські сушки на південному напрямку на нашій Херсонщині. Результат наших повітряних сил та безпосередньо Одеської зенітної ракетної бригади. Дякую вам, хлопці. І хай кожен російський льотчик точно знає, що буде наша відповідь кожному російському вбивці. Жоден з них не залишиться безкарним. Друге за сьогодні. Привітав з професійним днем сьогодні 2 наші дуже вагомі професійні спільноти українських енергетиків та українських дипломатів. Так, є у календарі спеціальних днів. 22 грудня – це День енергетика і День працівників дипломатичної служби України. Вранці відзначив державними нагородами робітників енергетичної галузі, таких людей, завдяки яким Україна може жити нормально, зі світлом, з опаленням. Проходимо зараз вже 2-гу зиму повномасштабної війни. І вона суттєво відрізняється від першої. Це результат колосальної роботи багатьох колективів, багатьох компаній, команд, урядовців, обласної влади. Я вдячний усім, хто працює заради нашої енергетики. Був сьогодні і на зустрічі з представниками нашої дипломатичної спільноти, тими, хто в системі МЗС, тими, хто поза системою здійснює зовнішню політику нашої держави. Цей рік був амбітним для України, і більшість амбіцій у відносинах з партнерами нам вдалося реалізувати. На наступний рік чіткі завдання, абсолютно зрозумілі KPI для усіх працівників і працівниць дипломатичної сфери України. Говорив сьогодні з Марком Рютте, прем'єр-міністром Нідерландів. Нідерланди готують для відправки в Україну перші винищувачі F-16. Від політичних рішень щодо надання літаків ми перейшли до навчання пілотів та інженерів. І тепер реалізуємо технічну частину. Власне, постачання F-16 я вдячний Нідерландам і усім іншим нашим партнерам, хто підтримує в цьому. Звичайно, обговорили з Марком і актуальні політичні питання, зокрема погодження в Євросоюзі нового пакету підтримки для України 50 мільярдів євро. Пакет необхідний, довготривалий. Це наша стійкість і, крім цього, встигли обговорити і підготовку нової зустрічі щодо реалізації формули миру. Зустрівся сьогодні із нещодавно призначеним міністром закордонних справ Польщі Сікорським. Оновлюємо наші відносини. Обговорили, як можемо вирішити наявні проблеми. Звичайно, я подякував Польщі за підтримку нашої держави в оборонній сфері. Ми маємо дуже серйозні можливості для подальшої спільної роботи, такої роботи, яка посилить обидва наших народи. Це стосується, зокрема, і спільних оборонних виробництв. Багато речей треба вирішити. Я впевнений, ми можемо це зробити. Ще одне. Провів нараду з міністром оборони та командою. Готуємо вирішення тих питань, які ставлять наші підрозділи, які у бойових бригадах. Питання мотивації, питання визначеності, термінів служби, питання поповнення. Сили оборони тримаються на людях, а люди – це дух і зброя. Обидва компоненти ми маємо забезпечити. Я дякую всім, хто допомагає, дякую всім, хто воює і працює заради інтересів України. Слава Україні!
And
Heroes Slava.
And with that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky on day 667 of the war. And we're about to be moving on into the second part. And oh, buddy, do we have time. We have about an entire hour where we will get to talk to each and every one of y'all, and we'll get to enjoy speaking to y'all for quite some time. Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so for our final poll and questions segment, we have one poll to address, and the poll question says, analysts warn that Ukraine should not overstate Russia's failures in the war or risk losing more support. And do you agree? 30% said no, Ukraine must overstate for morale purposes. 26% said yes, Ukraine's confidence is hurting aid. 25% said I'm somewhat indifferent. And 19% said unsure, undecided, or other. And on this one, I have to say that one thing Ukraine has had a history of doing is always overstating Russia's failures. Russia does fail in a large respect. Like pretty much everywhere, Russia fails across the board. But at the same time, if you overstate that too much, that might make the Western allies think, we don't need to supply as much aid as before because they got it under control. Well, that may not be the case. So to me, it seems like Ukraine should watch making too bold statements and sort of keep it down to reality. But that's just me. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that making too bold of statements probably isn't the greatest. I get it to a point, but I also don't get it. Like for us, sometimes we have to say things like Russian Air Force shot down because saying 3 Russian bombers shot down, that's not really going to, be like, so we have to, of course, do it on our end. But on the Ukrainian end, governmentally, they aren't trying to, tell people news. They just exist, so they don't really have to go out of their way to go say stuff like that. And I think that Matthew's kind of right. If you end up overstating everything, it may lead countries to go, oh, you know what? Actually, they aren't doing that badly. We can support them less and they'll still do fine. So I would say that they might want to be careful about overstating everything because that could end up being detrimental for them in the long run, support-wise. But with that, I hope that does address that. Also another thing I have to say as well is that overstating things also leads into another thing. It makes it sound like Western support isn't that important. Because when you say the Russians were abysmally failed since day one, and we didn't even need a lick of Western support to do that, we don't even really need Western support at all because we're just doing that well. But then at the same time, everyone knows that Ukraine relies heavily on foreign support to continue fighting this war. You're kind of creating a conundrum where, in one hand, you're pretty much saying we don't need the West, who cares about them, we can do this on our own. But at the same time, the reality is that Western support is really the only way the Ukrainians will be able to continue fighting this war. So going off those two things, it probably would be better for them to take a stance where they say something more along the lines of, the Russians have done badly, but we still need support to beat them because in the end, we need help doing it. So with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and that was our only poll to address. So, of course, y'all know what time it is. It's time to move back into our Super Chat questions. And up first, we have a $100 donation from the BC Skyman. And thank you very much, BC, for that very generous support. And it says, good evening, Enforcer Matt and Enforcer. And will the U.S. continue supporting Ukraine? And Merry Christmas to you and your family. And I'm definitely excited about the gun reviews, and I have several that you can review. And check out my twins' target practicing today at Jerry's. Shocking.
And thank you so much for the massive amount of support, BC Skyman, and I wish you a Merry Christmas. And also, on top of that, let's see here. I want to make sure to read this off bit by bit. First bit, will the U.S. continue supporting Ukraine? Maybe. It's a little hard to say. It's actually very hard for me to say because it seems like everyone's jumping ship. If no one's noticed, it appears that the Washington Post has removed the war in Ukraine as a topic from their search bar on their website. Because, they'll have things like events, sports, politics, stuff like that, and then they would have the war in Ukraine up there. Today, they removed that. It's no longer on their website. So they're not even making like a special category for the war in Ukraine. So it looks like a lot of the major news companies are starting to jump ship, maybe because they, just don't care. It's not bringing in the ratings they're looking for. Because, something funny? Most people, believe it or not, they never cover the war because they cared. They cover the war because it made money. Crazy, shocking, I know, right? And that's something that we haven't done, because if that was the case, we would be like every other YouTuber trying to follow the trend. We never did. And so, going off of that, it's kind of hard to say, because while people are jumping ship at the same time, usually the U.S. government does not care. Usually they will, support something for strategic interest or not. But right now, the waters are being murkied by other domestic political issues that, are kind of, not really related to Ukraine at all, but they're still being tied together. So, I hope that does address that well. And also, I hope that gives you a little bit more, and also that's not the last part of the question, but that's at least that part. And I hope that a lot of y'all notice, and I want y'all to notice this very carefully, because it's something that I just think it's very important to remember. A lot of people think, someone covers the war in Ukraine, therefore they must actually care. I would actually say at least 75% of the time that's incorrect. A lot of people cover the war in Ukraine because it was a trendy topic. And now I'm going to put money on it. I said this last night, and I'm going to say it again. I'm going to put money on it. The viewership is decreasing on YouTube as well, and we've noticed that as well. There's been about a 15% drop in our average viewership, although it's still remaining within the 40 to 50,000 view range that we've always had. It's starting to get on the lower end of that consistently, and we've noticed that as well. Doesn't matter to us. We're going to keep covering it hell in our high water. As long as we're able to keep the lights on in the background, it's going to be no concern to us whether there's 100 million people watching the news on the war in Ukraine or just 1 million. It will not matter to us. But at the same time, it will matter to a lot of people. Because oddly enough, if y'all noticed, a lot of the Ukraine war channels many of y'all watch didn't pop up on February 24th of 2022 like we did. A lot of them popped up in July or August of 2022, 6 months later, after the war in Ukraine was founded to be a trending topic for months on end and was going to be a massive moneymaker for anyone who could make it in that genre. You'll notice that with a lot of them. Or you'll notice that the channel in particular existed for quite a while before the war in Ukraine happened, but the first 6 months of the war, they hardly said anything about Ukraine until they made a couple of experimentation videos specifically about Ukraine, noticed they were getting more views than their old videos, and then they went and started making Ukraine war news only, because it made a lot of money. That's how a lot of the channels did that, and that's how a lot of the news companies work too. Not really a lot of them are in it because they care about America's strategic interest or the people in Ukraine or, the violation of a nation's sovereign borders. That doesn't matter to about 75% of the people covering this. It mattered because it made AdSense and they were able to get sponsors. And so I would say in 6 months, most of the people who are covering this, CNN, Fox, Washington Post, MSNBC, ABC, and a lot of the YouTube channels that are covering this are going to stop covering it and move on to whatever they were doing beforehand, because they won't be seeing the kind of numbers they like, and therefore they won't find it worthwhile. I'll just say this, over these next 6 months, y'all are going to find out who was really a supporter of Ukraine and who really wasn't, and who was here just to make a quick grab of cash and who was here because they actually cared. You will see. So that is also, that's kind of like my side shoot on that. But beyond that, it's so tough to tell right now. I can't really tell if we're going to begin support again or not, because I was pretty optimistic about a month and a half ago or 2 months ago when this started. But nowadays, it's getting more and more uncertain. But moving on to that next part, we are so excited about the gun reviews. We are looking forward to that massively, because we would love to be able to do the war in Ukraine news, really news around the world like the war in Ukraine, and also do the gun reviews as well. That is going to be very cool. It's going to be amazing to be able to do gun reviews. And if it really does take off, we would be more than happy to make these all the time. We love doing gun reviews. I'm a big fan of guns and firearms in general. So, I would love to tell y'all all the interesting things about firearms. And I'm sure a lot of y'all find the AK-74 video very interesting, because it is the most common rifle we see on film being used in Ukraine right now when we cover the news every night. And so with that, I hope that does address all parts of your super chat fairly well, BC Skyman, and we will make sure to check out your twins' target practicing. But I think we'll do that a little bit later, mostly for OPSEC reasons, because there are some crazies who do watch this channel, and considering that they're your twins, I wouldn't want some of these crazies to see your kids, because oddly enough, we have found out that some particular supporters of the channel have ended up being harassed by some very sick, twisted people out there, and they've just tried to make their lives miserable because they support this channel, and I do not want the possibility of your kids getting in that line of fire. So I'll make sure to check that out after the stream, but thank you so much once again for the support, BC Skyman, and helping this channel to keep on running. And of course, thank you for being a Lee Spring Army legend and an old guard. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And I gotta tell you real quick, BC, I actually went and watched that video you're talking about of your twins out there shooting the targets, and they are like really accurate with those rifles, by the way. Very impressive. And also, by the way, there's some very sick Harleys that you have in the beginning of that video. Very, very nice sounding exhaust on that one. I don't know which one of those is yours, but that's very cool. That black one is even cool too. I like that one as well. But yeah, very good target shooting, by the way. Unfortunately, you're going to have to take a look at that, because your twins, they're very good. Like almost bullseye every time.
Man, if only I could be that good. But some of the groupings, whenever I shoot, especially with pistols, it's all over the place. My hands are naturally shaky, so I'm not actually able to accurately shoot a pistol most of the time. Rifles I can get pretty okay at, but pistols, that's a tough time. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, I will make sure to check it out after the stream. But thank you so much once again for the support, BC Skyman, and I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one is going to go to Walter A. Lakota Jr. He throws in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Walter, as always, for that support. It's personal to all Ukrainians, for it's a war of survival, longevity, and most importantly, an ethnicity.
And I thank you so much for the huge amount of support, Walter A. Lakota, and being here as the OG LSM bosun and helping this channel to keep on running. I'd also have to say that it is very deep and personal to a lot of Ukrainians, and we always have an understanding of that here on this channel and try and address that the best we can. But to many people, and this is also something we try and keep in account as well, while it's very personal for a lot of Ukrainians, many people outside of Ukraine, the war is a pie in the sky kind of thing, especially for a lot of Americans. It doesn't really mean a lot to them because it's not something that's affecting them here at home. And we always try and make sure to, sell the war to both sides the best we can. We always make sure to weigh in on these are real people just like us, and it's a sovereign nation that's being wrongfully invaded. But also, on the other coin, it's also a war that has a lot of American strategic interests in it that not only benefits the Ukrainians if we support them, but greatly benefits the United States as well and the people here at home, and actually affects them on a personal level on the outcome of this war on that end. But I would certainly agree with you, Walter. No question about it. It is a very important war for the Ukrainians. And if they were to lose this war, which I don't think they will, I think the worst that could happen at this point is that they come out with a draw. They will most, well, hell, if they lose the war, let me get back to that. If they lose the war, it's probably not going to be great for them. The Russians have a racist streak in them when it comes to the Ukrainians. It's been historically proven, especially during the 20th century, with the Holodomor and a whole bunch of other atrocities that happened against the Ukrainians. And it would be atrocity for that to happen to them again. It'd be very similar to what's happening to some people in Western China right now, in very, very severe, questionable, and certainly a crime against humanity, by no doubt. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. But before we move on to the next one, I'm going to sponsor a live chat comment, because Leonardo Willie said, I bet money a lot of college grads today couldn't find Ukraine on a map. No,
Absolutely.
they could. They could find Ukraine on a map, and they'd also be able to find Israel on a map. But any other country that isn't a trendy topic, they would never be able to find. You could ask them, where's Chad? They would have no idea. You could say, where's Germany?
Chad?
Yeah, Chad, right here.
No, Chad's right here.
But anyways, moving on from that, you will be able to have them find stuff like that. But I will agree with you. It's very interesting to me how little some people know. And that's always just blown me away, because when I was a kid, the reason why I studied a lot is because I was always thinking, adults, they know like everything, and you have to know everything to be an adult. So I ended up just trying to learn everything I could about everything in the world. And then I grew up and I found out a lot of adults don't know squat. Like, you'll sit there and say something like, oh, the geopolitical situation with the Turks is a very interesting one, with them trying to create their own sphere of influence. And then they'll go, I don't know a lot about Turks, but them damn Turks, I buy them for Thanksgiving. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? It's a country. I'm like, Turkey is a country. And it's bizarre, really, to find that out when you grow up. And also, another thing that really draws me away from the political sphere is that it seems like a lot of those people become very political, and like you have like this two-dimensional concept of, how the world works. And then they try and apply that to what's nearly a four-dimensional subject. Like a two-dimensional translation of, this sucks because that. And it's like, well, there's more than one thing going on. Like, for example, when you get a job, it's not just about you making money. You have less time free in your days. You also have to account for driving and how much gas costs. There's a whole lot that goes into that. And you have to view it as a three-dimensional thing. But with how people view like politics, it's always like a two-dimensional thing, and it just blows me away. And also, it really makes, and I hate to say this because democracy is the best thing, but at the same time, Winston Churchill's quote where he said the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter, that honestly to me is a pretty true statement, because I never really see a lot of intelligent topics and points being brought out of politics. That's also why I try and avoid it greatly. It's not that it's a divisive thing. It's, because it's not a two-dimensional thing to me. It's not just one reason that we have politics ruled out here. It's also that usually there's not a lot of factors considered in a political conversation. It's just like a one-point topic. It doesn't consider all of the pros and cons of a decision, whether it be good or bad or what. But beyond that, I would agree with your statement for the large part. Most college graduates wouldn't be able to find anything on a map. And I could tell you that because some people in law school, they would surprise you with how much they know. Like, you're like, wait a minute, you don't know that? Like, I said, oh, the war's going on. And some of them were like, it's still going on? It's like, well, don't you know? I mean, like, I know I do this every day as a job, but, even still, I know about all the conflicts going on around the world. There's still the Sudanese civil war. There's the Venezuelan annexation of half of Guyana. There's the ongoing coup in Myanmar. There's also, I believe at the moment, there's some kind of a little thing going on somewhere in South America, like some sporadic firefights with the federal police of some nation down there. There's I know about them. It's not like I'm just completely unaware, but it blows me away when some people are like that. It's bizarre to me. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one is going to go to Hal Rose, who throws in a $33 donation.
Hey!
And thank you, Hal, very much as well for that very generous support. And Hal says, Enforcer Matt, Baba, is now a mothership and ferries FPV drones close to the combat zone. $500 versus $16,000. And please pick a question, please.
And thank you so much for the support, Hal Rose. And yes, it has become a drone carrier, which is really cool because Baba Yaga has really evolved over time. It went from being a anti-tank mine dropper to now it's a drone carrier, and I think that's a smart evolution of the Baba Yaga, and it's certainly going to be allowing the Ukrainian drone forces to have a lot more lethality at even greater ranges. And so, with that, I gotta thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and not only that, being a channel legend. Hal, you are the person that we know will always be here on every single Sunday fundraiser, and I think that's a amazing thing. And not only that, I've got to thank you for occasionally coming in and dropping a super chat towards this channel and helping us to keep this thing rolling. It means a lot to us and really makes this thing possible, because without folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here on air. And thank you so much once again. We will make sure to pick a question from the chat, but really quickly, I see people throwing compliments my way, saying that we're smarter than the average bear and intellectual. I have to say thank you so much for those kind words. It really does. It's great to hear. But I'm not intellectual, and I'm not smarter than the average bear. I think when I am,
I'd hope you're smarter than the average bear.
Well, I would hope
we're smarter than bears.
I would hope so, but in all honesty, addressing that, I don't really want to act like I'm smarter than the average person, because that's just smug and arrogant. I try and act like I am just, normal, because I am. I mean, like, what I know, a lot of y'all here on this channel know more than me and throw in interesting little tidbits and facts to even correct me. So I know that I'm not smarter than the average bear. There are certainly a lot more smarter people out there, and I'm probably just falling within the average. But at the same time, y'all know the saying as well, the dumbest people speak the loudest. And I think that's a big thing of the modern world, is that a lot of the people who don't really know what they're talking about, they get out there and they say a lot, and they, just get really into it. And they seem to make up a majority of the people out there. And I think that's what the problem is these days. Well, it's always been the problem, is that the dumbest people always find a way to yell the loudest. And so they end up really just being the dominant voices of everything. But still, with that, hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next, well, we're actually on to that live chat that Hal wanted.
All right, and the live chat question is going to go to Clyde, who says, will Ukraine be able to continue without U.S. support?
I think they will, but it will not be a victory like we were hoping. It will most likely end up being a draw in between the Russians and the Ukrainians. That would be my opinion on that, because they could still win in the long run, just that they're not going to be able to get everything that they wanted, or they may have to give up a couple of things here and there. So in that sense of them surviving the war, yes, they could still win the war without U.S. support, but it would be a lot tougher. It would be very difficult to pull off. And so with that, I hope that does address that live chat, sponsored by the one and only Hal Rose. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat question is going to go to Nick, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much for that support. He says, I'm just wondering, what do your parents think of all of you all hosting this channel and having so many followers, and also any news on those finals?
And thank you so much for the support, Nick. And that is a very interesting question. We have not gotten any news on the finals at all. So, hopefully the grades are good. That's all we're hoping for. And that's also a bit of my stress, probably, is thinking, man, if I failed those grades, it's going to be terrible. And honestly, I'm probably a little bit more concerned about it than Matthew, because pretty much all the time I had whenever I came home every day, because I get home at like 4:30 each day, I pretty much went straight into working on this and never really got to read or study anything in law school. I kind of just had to, rush into the next thing all day, and then wake up at, 5:30 in the morning the next day and repeat it all over again. So I'm very concerned about the grades. I don't know what they will be like. Hopefully they're somewhere within average or just a little bit below average. But our parents don't really put a lot into this. They say it's a great thing, but, we don't really hear a lot of, comments or anything. As long as we're paying the rent to be in this basement, that's really the only thing that counts to them. So, that's kind of how it goes. Every once in a while they do say they're proud of it, and it's incredible that we've been able to raise $1.3 million for nonprofits and also do this as a job for 2 years. But at this point, I think the newness of us doing this has worn off to the point it's not like a massive thing like it was at the start, where it was just unbelievable to do this, because you know, my parents have probably heard me ever since I was at least 14 or 13 talk like this my entire life. You know, just speak about stuff like this in this detail and just go on pretty much lecture length discussions about things around the world. And so they weren't really, you know, they're not really blown away by what I do. You know, I just pretty much took my rambling and just brought it onto air on a topic that everyone cares about. And so when it blew up, that was what was amazing about it. But, you know, what I say on the stream, they kind of have heard that for so long, it's not even that interesting to them. You know, it's kind of like how comedians are very funny to a whole lot of people, but then they're not funny to their family because they just deal with them all the time. But nevertheless, with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you so much once again for supporting Nick and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who make this thing possible. And if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to sit here and talk about what our parents think of what we do, because we wouldn't be able to do it. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and the next one is going to go to that mom who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much to that mom for that support. And that mom says, I hope you're all, call your family. I hope you're all with your family. And if not, give them a call. Give them a call. Happy holidays, fam. And I hope you all having many, many more. No cap.
No cap. Bussin'. But nevertheless, thank you so much for the support, that mom, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope y'all are all with your family. I know we were with ours because we were in the basement. But beyond that, if you're not, do give them a call. They would probably love to hear from you. And also, happy holidays to all of y'all. Merry Christmas to you, that mom, and a Merry Christmas to everyone. I hope y'all have an amazing one. And I hope that, like that mom said, y'all have many more down the road. It's a great time of year. In my opinion, it's the best time of year. And hopefully we'll be able to enjoy our Christmas day off, because we only get the one, and it's our Monday off. So it's not giving us like a 2-day period off air. It's just the 1 day, but that's fine because the war is important and deserves to be covered. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support, that mom, and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope we address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And whoa, Jack, we're moving on to the next one, which goes to 655, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much for that support. And Enforcer, anyways.
Whoa. I have to thank you for the support. Yeah, and I got to thank you for helping this thing to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running. You know what I mean? But with that, thank you so much once again. It means a lot, really does. It means a great deal. And thank you once again. And with that, I think we're on to the next one. You know what I mean? But thank you so much.
And I was in the foothills of the Himalayas with Xi Jinping. And my hairy leg. But anyways, moving on to our next one. We have a $20 super chat from Captain Kirk. And it's good to see Captain. Hope Spock's with you. It's Captain Kirk. He's here. Spaceship Discovery, or whatever it's called. Or Enterprise, I think. But
Spaceship Earth? That's that ride at Disney. That's that ride at Disney, man.
Captain Kirk says, how far east has the front line moved since the offensive began?
Well, if we're talking about the Balaklia counteroffensive, it moved about 50 miles. But beyond that, we have not really seen the front lines moving any further east towards the Russian border or any further west into Ukraine. It's largely stayed the same. But nevertheless, I hope that kind of does address that somewhat well. But nevertheless, it's crazy to have Captain Kirk in here with us. When we were growing up, we watched a lot of Star Trek, specifically the original series and the Next Generation. Honestly, out of the two of them, I like the Next Generation more than the original series, to be honest. It was a little bit more fleshed out to me, and also the sets were better and more futuristic looking, at least to us. But we were huge Trekkies growing up. You know, it was very interesting to me. But one thing I always didn't like is that whenever they got into like the war segments, the wars always seemed a little unrealistic. But then again, it wasn't like a war show. It was more about, you know, everything else. But Star Trek was a really interesting show growing up. And the topic, I really liked the Next Generation, specifically because they would explore moral topics, but there wouldn't be like a clear answer to it. You know, like they would allow a lot of like gray area and discussion to it, and then a decision would be made. And that was always very interesting about it, because instead of being a show that kind of like took like a leaning and then just shoved itself hard into that leaning, the Next Generation kind of sat in the middle and actually had a discussion with fair points brought up on all sides about what would be the right or wrong thing to do. And that was really interesting to me as like a show premise. And not only that, made the show incredibly interesting just on the abstract level. And then it was just a really good show beyond that because the cast was amazing too. But still,
I don't know. The first one, the original series, was pretty good. I liked how just simplistic it was and how, like, raw, because their budget wasn't large on that. And also, when it first came out, it wasn't very popular either until after, a little time passed and then people started watching it like, hey, I actually like that show, actually. But, TNG was good, but it wasn't as good as the first one, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that. But then again, the original Star Trek did get a little weird sometimes, like with the Greek gods, that one episode. It's like, what is that? Like, but
that Roddenberry fellow was wilding on a couple of those episodes. I don't know what was going on.
Dude, he was on some of them episodes, he was literally just like, now make them kiss. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, it's like, what does this have to do with the plot? I mean, I don't know. And then some people are big Star Wars fans. I'm seeing some of y'all come out. And I don't mean to make a fight in between the Star Wars and Star Trek community. I will say this, however, the first 6 Star Wars movies were very good. I mean, the prequels, if you want to call them that, they're okay. I think the original 3 movies were amazing, great sets, great everything. They were just wonderful movies, but it's more so for entertainment value, and I have to say, Star Wars does a far greater deal, entertainment value-wise, than it does with Star Trek. Star Trek isn't as entertaining as Star Wars, so it kind of depends, what do you like more entertainment-wise? Do you like to be entertained, or do you like to watch something that may be more interesting and more philosophical or more abstract? That's kind of, I think where the divide in between the Star Wars and the Star Trek people come from. But nevertheless, I can't knock Star Wars because it does what it does amazingly well, and Star Trek does too. It's more so just like a preference thing. To me, I like Star Trek better. Like, I'm not going to lie, because Star Wars is just good for the movies, but, everything beyond that is kind of bad. And then the movies they made recently, those were just kind of lame. Like, I'm not getting into like the whole thing where people try and politicize them. I just didn't really like them for plot points. Like, how the hell do you bring Palpatine back and make that make sense? I mean, they didn't even explain that in the movie. They literally just said, somehow he returned. It's like, that's just poor writing, in my opinion, and just trying to come up with something lame. And then it was like those 3 movies, they went with the same premise that the first 3 movies went with. Oh, look, they got some giant orb that blows away planets. I was like, can't we come up with something new? It doesn't have to be blowing up a planet. We could, you could do something entirely different with that. You got endless room to come up with a whole different plot, but they went with the same one. So that was kind of lame to me. But, beyond that, Star Trek's not that bad at all to me, and Star Wars isn't that bad either, if you pick the right ones. Some of them do get a little gamey, though. Like Star Trek Voyager, I've got to be honest, not to rabbit hole on all this for too long, but Star Trek Voyager was just kind of meh, Like, it wasn't that showy. Deep Space Nine, I see a lot of y'all talking about that one. That one was great. But Voyager just was, like, lame,
The actors weren't that good. I think that's what messed it up.
Well, they had a couple of good ones in there, like Tupac and Chakotay were pretty good.
Tupac?
Yeah, Tupac, the Vulcan guy.
They really called him Tupac?
Dude, you watched like 8 seasons of it. Yeah, they called him Tupac. He was on there. But like Tupac and Chakotay were really good actors. And I think they went on to whole other movies. But everyone else, it was just kind of like, like they didn't really jive well with each other on screen. And also they just didn't really act that well, in my opinion. Compared to all of the other series that Star Trek had. But Deep Space Nine was an amazing one as well. On up there, I'd say that's like below, like in order, The Next Generation, the original series, and then you had Deep Space Nine. It was really good. But anyway, oh, no, not Tupac. Tuvok, sorry. It wasn't Tupac. Tupac got gunned down. Tuvok was the one who was on the void. Yeah, anyways, sorry, I mixed that one up.
The other guy Chipotle.
No, Chakotay, but man, Chipotle not that bad either. I mean, if that was a follow-up actor in the cast, that wouldn't be a bad one. But anyways, it's the angry people say you just can't name someone Tupac. Well, it's Tuvok. It's so damn close. It's like it's literally just a few letters off from each other. It's Tuvok or Tupac. It's hard to come up with. But anyways, no cap. Anyways, with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope that does address that well.
All right, and the next one goes to Walter A. Lakota Jr., who throws in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Walter, once again, for that support. He says, "Me again. I never." He's oh, this is a quote, by the way, quote unquote. "I never let schooling get in the way of my education." End quote from Mark Twain. Fact about him: Huckleberry Finn was written by Samuel Longhorn Clemens, and The Adventures of Tom Sawyer was by Mark Twain, the same person.
And thank you so much for the support, Walter A. Lakota. And thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. And also, I'd have to say, Mark Twain, in my opinion, was a really good writer. And I think The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn was probably better than The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Tom Sawyer kind of like... Well, actually, no, let me think. I think it was actually The Adventures of Tom Sawyer that was the better one, because I think that was the one that involved him getting on like a barge and sailing down the Mississippi River. I think that was that one. Whichever one that was, because I can't really remember the storylines exactly, that was really good. They were both required readings, actually, here in school in Alabama. So we had to read both of them. And those were like the only books I read during school that were good. Grapes of Wrath, Of Mice and Men, and The Great Gatsby. I've got to be honest with y'all, those are overrated as hell. I don't know who reads those and like really enjoys them because they were so boring and they just dragged on. But Mark Twain was a really good writer because he could actually make it interesting enough that he could draw you in and like world build in his stories. I really liked him. But beyond that, very cool to hear you talk about Samuel Clemens and Mark Twain, because apparently Mark Twain was some kind of a nickname that he got while he was working on riverboats on the Mississippi. And I think his actual name, I think his actual name was Samuel Clemens, and then he like added in a little middle name thing, kind of like as a nickname as well. But nevertheless, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Walter, and throwing in a really interesting little side fact and a really cool one about Mark Twain, who I think is one of the best, like, late 19th century American writers out there. He just had some really good stories to tell. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Historic Tasmanian, who throws in a 15. And thank you very much for your support as well. They said, "Merry Christmas to the LSA. No questions, just love."
And thank you so much for the support and throwing out the love, baby. But still, thank you so much for supporting this channel and helping us keep it running. And also, once again, a Merry Christmas to everyone. And I hope that everyone is enjoying their Christmas already. A lot of y'all are probably already on a Christmas break, hopefully, or y'all are getting very close to having one. Regardless, I hope y'all have a fun one and a great one. And I thank you very much for wishing us a Merry Christmas. And I hope you have a very Merry Christmas as well, Historic Tasmanian. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support. Also, Matthew the Observer said, "Of Mice and Men made me cry." Yeah, you know, that was a weird ending, Matthew. You know, when he was like, "Just look over the lake, Lenny." Bop! And got him. You know, it's like, huh?
And then he committed a homicide right there in the middle of the story.
Yeah, well, at the end, like...
Oh, at the end of the story. I didn't even read it.
Lenny, don't squeeze the puppy. And then he squeezes it to death. It's like, what the hell is the story?
What the hell's wrong with him?
Well, you know, Lenny was he wasn't exactly firing on all pistons, put it that way. So, wait a minute, it was required reading. How do you not remember it?
I think I might have spark noted it or something.
Oh, man. Did you missed out because I had to read it.
Hell, I made an A in the class. It doesn't matter, man. I made an A+.
Man, I remember at one point in the story, okay, this, if you have kids, take them away because I'm going to have to say a word here because it is in the story. But at, like, the middle part of the story, like, they were working on, like, this farm, you know, that's, you know, kind of, you know, it was like a grape farm or whatever. But anyways, they're all working this farm, living in barracks. It's the Great Depression, so, you know, everyone's, like, broke, poor, and so they're living in barracks at this farm. And so all the workers go, "Hey, y'all, we're going to the whorehouse." And then they just bring back prostitutes in the story, and that's, like, 50 pages of it. It's like, damn, it's like, did you have to, like, it was, like, descriptive, too. It was like, is this, like, the 1920s, 30s version of 50 Shades of Grey? Like, what's happening in the story? Like, I don't get this part.
So the fella brought back the the prostitutes to the disabled guy.
Yeah. And that's that's why he has to end up killing Lenny too, because one of the working ladies, to put it that way, ended up becoming friends with Lenny And then Lenny ended up accidentally killing her in the barn. So then he ran away, and because some other guy liked her, he got pissed off and wanted to kill Lenny. And so the other character in the story, he had to go out there to the lake where Lenny was, because he told him to always go there if anything bad happens, and he took a pistol out there and shot him in the back of the head, so that way the other guy wouldn't come out there and shoot him in the gut and make him die a painful death. Hopefully he would die a quick and swift death at the hand of his friend. So that was like the whole story, pretty much in a nutshell.
That's bonkers. I'm glad I read the Spark Notes. I never heard of all that. What was the moral of the story exactly? Why were we reading this?
I don't really think there was a moral of the story. I guess it just was, don't work on a grape farm. I guess that was the moral of the story. But anyways,
I guess English teachers were like, "Oh yeah, this is great stuff right here." Oh yeah.
let's talk about what the dead woman in the barn symbolizes. What does her broken neck symbolize? But anyways, we're on to the next one. We've been rabbit holing on this too long.
All right, so our next one is going to go to Bob Anon, who puts in a $15 donation, and thank you very much, Bob, for that support. He says, given Russia disregard for their own soldiers and the socioeconomic background of the average soldier, could this war be an intentional modern-day eugenics program to putify their own people?
And a lot of people always try and point towards that, and that's actually been something talked about even in the First World War. A lot of people said the British elite were trying to kill off the British populace so that way they could, do whatever. I never think wars are for those reasons, because nobody ever really likes to kill off just discriminately most of the population core just because they're on the lower pyramid. Lower part of the pyramid. Usually that's never happened, I don't believe, except for, like in genocides. Like, you can go look at Pol Pot in Cambodia, and he's a great example of, just killing off a quarter of a nation's population just because he didn't like them, for certain reasons that he justified through communism. But beyond that, I don't think that's happening here with Russia. I think he's just throwing them into the meat grinder, not because of like any grand scheme or anything. He just has a general disregard for the common rank and file of the Russian Federation. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, Bobanon, the best I can. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. A very interesting point, one that's been brought up time and time again through multiple wars, but I don't think it would stand up in this one. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, who puts in a $5 donation. And thank you, Sarge, once again. He said, tonight on Map Adventures, let's visit a place in Israel that was built by the great Caesar himself, called Caesarea. One of the coolest places I've been.
I think it's Caesarea.
Or Caesar. Okay.
Caesarea. Man, we get into that damn Caesarea. But let's see.
Me want some pizzeria and a Caesarea.
Pizza. Let's see what we got here. We can see a little bit of the Roman structure. Very cool. Very cool. I don't know what kind of Roman structure this would have been, but still pretty neat. Let's see what we got here. We got some fortifications. And that actually looks a little bit like a small minaret right there. Possibly a holdover from Ottoman times. We can see right here, sarcophagus lid adorned with a Gorgon's head. Matthew, look, it's the Gorgons from Star Trek. Hey, look, it's one of them.
Hey, look, it's Putin's mother.
Oh, you didn't have to do it. You brutalized, but look at that's really cool, actually. Actually, funnily enough, the most Roman structures exist outside of Rome in the Middle East, because due to the arid and dry atmosphere out there, it preserved a lot of their structures incredibly well. But sadly, a lot of them also have not survived the past 20 years due to all of the instability in the region, and a lot of radical groups destroying the monuments because it apparently, according to a lot of them, isn't of their faith. So, sadly, a lot of them don't exist, but this one does. And that is really neat. Look at that. This almost is like an entire, it's almost like ancient Ostia. Let's see where this is. So here's the so that's the amphitheater. And I think we were looking at that earlier. And then we can see some more out here. We see this part may have fallen off into the sea from erosion. And then we can see a hippodrome. Really good. This must have been a fairly large settlement here then, because for them to have a hippodrome, you had to, pass a certain size. I think it was like 25,000 people to have one of those. But wow, pretty impressive. Bomb shelters all over the place. Very smart move by them. And here
the hotels aren't cheap there either, even in the middle of this problem they're having.
Let's see, where are the hotels?
Over there on the left, it says 308 for the first one, 136 for the second. Pretty expensive for a war zone.
Yeah, that's actually pretty damn pricey. Let's go look at this $308 one. It's on a whole resort. That must be why it's expensive. But let's look at the rooms. Oddly enough,
nice.
They actually look really nice. Yeah, look at these bathrooms. Pretty modern, too. And the
Much
food?
nicer than a Holiday Inn, but still, $300 a night in a war zone? I don't know about that. Oh, they got the booze laying all over the table like a drunkard's been here.
Man, missiles flying over you all the time will do that to you. You will start to drink, but what a nice place. I mean, this is really impressive.
They got a pool table in the middle of the pool. It's literally a pool table,
Look,
no pun intended.
They have a pool in the pool. It's really cool. But what a place. I mean, I get why the price is expensive because it's pretty high end. It's always shocking to see this kind of stuff, because this actually is better than most American hotels at this kind of a price range. So I'm actually very impressed by that. And also, what are these? Like greenhouses or something? I would assume these are greenhouses, but really cool nevertheless. And thank you, LSA Sergeant Figment, for showing this to us. And they also, wait a minute, hang on. They have a whole entire golf course attached to this resort.
That's pretty unique, actually. And where is this in the middle of Israel? Like, let me see.
This is north of Tel Aviv, like halfway in between there and Haifa.
Okay, so I guess they hadn't gotten hit.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, if anything, we've seen that everything gets stopped at Haifa or Tel Aviv. So this area is probably like one of the safest areas in Israel right now as far as the rocket attacks go.
They must still be having good business too for their prices to remain that high because it seems like they didn't have customers. They'd like lower those prices down a little further to get business.
Yeah, what's really weird is that Israel is so much more like the United States in the way their urban planning goes than really anyone is, because Israel really only existed once car culture existed. There wasn't really anyone living in the area of modern day Israel until then. So a lot of their infrastructure, like you'll see, they have like subdivisions that are just randomly popped up in places, just like America, which is really bizarre to see because you never think about Israel being ancient. A lot of people think of Israel being ancient, and it is, but at the same time, the large amount of people who live in Israel these days, they only showed up really after 1950 or so. Car culture was a thing, and so the urban planning revolves around car culture instead of like in Europe where people had to walk places because the settlements were founded for thousands of years. But really cool nevertheless, and thank you for showing that to us, LSA Sergeant Figment, and showing us a really cool place that'll be on the bucket list in the future to go to. But with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Teslans, who puts in a $5 donation, and no comment to address, but thank you very much, Teslans, for that support and helping to keep us running. We also have a 5 from CK Bold, who says take a live chat on me, and we shall. Thank you very much, CK Bold, as always, for that support. And the live chat question is going to go to James Lynn, who says, do we know what shot them down, in reference to the 3 SU jets that were shot down?
We do not know at the moment. The Ukrainians have not disclosed what kind of air defense system shot them down. There has been rumors that a Patriot defense battery has been moved into the area and is now operating there, but it could be anything. It could be a Buk, it could be a Tor. Well, the Ukrainians really don't have Tors. Could be a Tunguska, it could be man-pads. It could have just been the fact that they were flying so many aircraft in such a dangerous area of the front line that naturally they ended up being shot down by a lot of the indigenous anti-air systems that had been there since the beginning of the war. Sadly, we don't know at the moment, but there is a rumor out there that it could have been a Patriot. We know that at least. And so with that, I hope that does address that quite well. And thank you, CK Bowl, for sponsoring that live chat. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Neil Vizanot, who puts in a 2. He says, love you guys. Keep on keeping on, and good night.
And thank you so much for the support. Thank you for enjoying that we're keeping on. And you have a great night as well. And you sleep well, Neil. And thank you for being an old guard and a channel legend. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And with that, we have fairly addressed fairly well all of the super chats for the night. So once again, thank you all very much for the support of the channel and helping to keep this whole operation running, including now the streams, the videos, and the whole shebang. And with that being said, we're moving on to our live chat questions. And up first, we had the Morse code decoders of the stream. And tonight we had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Rumpelstiltskin, Toxic Bananas, Tightlines LSO, and also David Millsap. So they solved the Morse tonight. And said tonight's Morse reads, Russian pilots are becoming an endangered species. Long live the LSA, slava Ukraine, slava LSA.
Man, ding, 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 ding. Shh. That's the sound of money, and y'all got that Dan on the nail. That Smith & Wesson got me moving like an invasive species. But nevertheless, y'all did get y'all did get the Morse code message correct. That was the message of the night. And the Russians, well, at least the pilots, are starting to become endangered, for sure. No question, no doubt. But with that, I got to thank y'all for getting that Morse code message correct, because y'all are always on top of it and getting it right each and every single time. And with that, we're going to be moving on to the live chats proper, meaning we'll be able to address questions that were thrown in without any support attached. We always make sure to address some of these every single night, and we'll be able to address them for about the next 9 minutes. And so with that, we are on to the first one.
And the first one goes to Graham Gardner, who says, Enforcer, how many Su-34s does Russia actually have? Do you know?
We do not know off the top of our heads at the moment, because we do know of other Su-34s that have been lost throughout the war, and we also don't know if the Russians were able to produce any during the war, because it's been going on for 2 years, and we would assume that at some point they may have been able to eke out 1, 2, maybe a handful of Su-34s to replace their losses with. So at the moment, we don't know for certain, but let me check Su-34. Let's go check the Wikipedia numbers. So apparently, they say that there's 148 serial versions of the Su-34 in service, but considering that we know about 20 to 30 of them have been shot down, that number's probably closer to around 110. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one is going to go to, let's see here, Robert Harrington, who says, does Russia have a rescue unit for downed pilots? And I've never heard of them yet during the whole war. I haven't heard of them with that word.
But to answer that, I would not know. I've never heard of a pilot recovery unit. I know that the U.S. has pilot recovery units, but I don't know if the Russians have one. Let me see if they do. Let's type in pilot recovery unit, Russia. Let's see. So it appears that they are able to conduct one-off rescue operations, but they don't have units that are specifically made for it. So the answer would be, if a rescue was ever conducted for a pilot, it would be kind of like an off-the-cuff sort of thing, where they just took like a helicopter unit, just said, you're going to go save a pilot, but they don't have a specific unit or like duty where you just go and save pilots. So with that, I hope that does address that well, at least based off the information that we have, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Jorge Lopez, who says, any news about young Ukrainian men leaving the country to avoid conscription?
Actually, we've heard a lot of news about a lot of Ukrainian men of all ages leaving the country to try and escape service. That's something that actually normally happened at the beginning of the war, and funnily enough, they always got through bribing the border guards. The border guards would take a cash payment, usually somewhere around $10,000 US from what we were told, to allow these people to cross, although no males in between the ages of 18 to 45 under any circumstances were allowed to leave the country, except under the express permission of the office of the president of Ukraine. A lot of them ended up leaving. And so we have heard a lot about it, and it's not just anyone in between the, not just young men. It's really everyone within the conscriptable age. A lot of them tried to leave, and a lot of them did end up leaving as well. And that's why we're hearing the Ukrainians starting to request that these people be returned. That's also why you'll notice that a lot of Ukrainians that left, especially the men, ended up going to countries that probably would not extradite them back to Ukraine if they were found to have, left Ukraine without any actual approval from the Ukrainian government. A lot of Ukrainians have ended up in countries like Sweden, Switzerland, and Canada, just to name a few, to try and get away from ever being sent back into Ukraine, because the European Union is probably going to work very closely with the Ukrainians to send these males back if the Ukrainians request, and they already have started to request their return. So going off of that, We have heard about it. Some people understand why these people did it. Some people didn't. Me personally, as you know, putting myself in their shoes as an American, I could never really get the idea of just packing up and leaving my country. Just because a war started and I don't want to fight it. I mean, you know, you can have your disagreements with America however much you want being an American citizen, but at the end of the day, you have a duty to your nation and to your people, your family, your neighbors, and everyone that you know, love, and hold dear to pick up arms and defend the nation, especially if it calls on you. I've never really liked the idea of just packing up and leaving, and I know a lot of people are like, well, you never served. It doesn't matter. Like, you know, good job on you for gatekeeping, but the honest truth is anyone can have an input on that, and my input is that that's not right to leave everyone you know and love behind to flee because you're scared. I call that cowardice. And that would just
it is cowardly.
And that's my take on it. You know, and there are some actual notable examples that have been touched on before, but you know, people leave it be. You know, I'm going to leave it be because we're not trying to cause, you know, any troubles or anything, but I don't like the concept of leaving a country that you were born and raised in because it got invaded or it's at war and the nation's called on you. I know a lot of people are about to bring up Vietnam, you know, well, you know, that is what it is. I still think that that's cowardice. And so with that, hope that does address that well. And let's see. Barry Wilbur said, "I'll defend America, but I may leave my state." Hey, if you, as long as you stay in the United States, it doesn't really matter. Because you know, leaving your state isn't a big issue. It's just leaving the country, because then you're not accessible to the selective service. You know, for that matter, or the military. So with that, I hope that does address that well. I'm seeing a lot of hot takes here. Let's see. And George Tinder said, if they were that committed to avoid fighting, they would be useless in uniform, everyone. Anyway, not everyone is meant to be a soldier. Not everyone's meant to be a soldier. That's right. And I would be honest with you, I'm probably not meant to be a soldier. Hell, I probably wouldn't even pass MEPS because I've got double major scoliosis. But the fact of the matter is that you still have to serve, even if you don't feel like you would be a good soldier, you have to serve. It's a part of your duty. You know, the military in that kind of a situation isn't looking for people who are made to be soldiers. They are looking for people who can pick up a gun. That's all that counts at that point. And
also looking for people that can actually like drive a truck, do logistics and other stuff rather than simply combat, because you know all that stuff is the backbone of the whole military.
Yeah, you know, and also like Matthew was saying, not all roles are, you know, inherently fighting roles. In World War II, only I think it was like 12% of the draftees were in infantry roles or combatant roles. Everyone else was in a supporting role. So you had like an 89% chance of getting a MOS that was going to put you into a, you know, non-combatant role, and you will never have to fight or pick up a rifle most times. And that's something that I think is important as well. You're depriving your nation of yourself when they need you the most. And that's something that I think can only be described as cowardice. Everyone must serve if the necessity arises. And I think that anyone who flees is not only turning their backs on their families and everyone they know, but they're turning their backs on where they exist in the first place. I mean, if I flee America, if a war started and, you know, the draft started happening and I fled to Canada, I have betrayed literally every single day I've been alive. I've lived in America every single day that I've been alive. I've, of course, you know, traveled outside of the country here and there, really just to the UK for like a few weeks. But beyond that, everything I've ever done, everything I've ever lived, every single thing that's ever happened, it has been in America. And to just pick up and leave from that because you're scared of serving and defending everything that you are, that is cowardice to me. I'm going to die on that hill. I don't think anyone could ever change my opinion on that, because if the moment came, I'm going to admit I would be scared as hell if I got a draft notice, but I'm still going to go down to the reporting station and go into the military if they ask. I will be scared as hell the entire time. I promise you that. But it's a part of your duty as a citizen to defend the nation. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Ryan Peacock, who says, any word about the captured Bradley we seen not too long ago?
We haven't heard a lot of word about it. And also, I misidentified that on stream. I said that was the Ukrainians towing it away. It was actually the Russians towing away an intact Bradley. So, going off of that, I would say we haven't heard much about it. It's probably not going to be that big of an issue because those iterations of the Bradley are looking to be replaced and are fairly old. So technologically, there's not going to be a lot that's sacrificed from that Bradley being captured, at least on the national edge of things. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the final question of the night. And who was the lucky last person to put in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is John B. Rimple, who, excuse me, who says, Enforcer, any truth to the story that the Su-34s were shot down by the Patriot battery?
Good question. A lot of people have been talking about that tonight, and there's been a lot of rumors circling around that. There is a decent bit of validity to it just due to the volume of aircraft that were shot down, but at the same time, we've had no proof to confirm if a Patriot was in that area yet. At the moment, it's just a rumor. We'll have to wait for an official Ukrainian announcement, if they ever make one, on what kind of air defenses shot down those aircraft. So at the moment, it's really just rumors and guesswork as far as to what kind of air defense system may have shot it down, whether it be a Patriot, an Igla, a Piorin, Gepard, we don't know. But, you know, it's plausible it could have been a Patriot that was moved into the area. And so with that, that is the final question of the night right there. I thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure running the stream for each and every one of y'all. I hope y'all have enjoyed tonight. If y'all did, and you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. It does help us to reach more people and keeps you notified of when we run these streams, which is around 10 p.m. Eastern Time. I don't know why I had to think about that. But 10 p.m. Eastern Time every single night, 6 days a week except for Mondays. We're always on air, and we're always running this channel. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And good night, folks. We'll see you all tomorrow night. Thank you all for another great stream. And don't forget about that Christmas rapping, that good old fun times. And good night.
Yes. The Lee Spring Army sends its regards.